All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to Total Tabletop, and today we are going to be doing another episode of world building. This is episode 2. Sorry we missed last week. It was 4th of July, and so we had everybody taking some time to hang out with their family. We have a new face here, and we have a face that you guys may be expecting to see, which we'll go over in a second. But we'll do some quick introductions. My name is Steelax, also known as Sean. It's my real name, but I like Steelax better. So we're going to continue the series. If you guys are watching this, we want to welcome you. And if you are a dev applicant, this will be another one of the episodes you'll be catching up on. So we are going to be going through the rest of the process. Let's see, a little bit about myself. We've been streaming the channel for about 2 years, and the channel's been growing, bringing a lot of new projects, and that means we need a lot of new people. So this current one, we are building a brand new system, a whole new game, and the intent for it is to be brought to the channel, and we're also going to be publishing some books and modules and everything to be going with this thing. We're going to be debuting it on the channel, but also going to be bringing all this material in published format to the community, which will take a lot of people helping develop it, play test it, edit all the material. So this is a big project, definitely not going to be done overnight. So with no tentative end date, but it should be a lot of fun. We're looking for people who enjoy this kind of thing and doing the collaboration together. So if you are interested, hopefully everything we're saying makes sense and sounds like a lot of fun. Everything is tentative to change. We are still currently up, making everything. So anything, say that 6 months from now, it's mid-July at this point. Some things that you watch now may be completely changed. But at the moment, that is what it is. So that's enough about me. Let's meet our 2 devs who are here with me. We'll start with Joe, and then we'll go to Bart.
Hello. You'll have seen me 2 weeks ago, last episode. I've been tinkering around with the world building project, kind of not quite from inception because there was a gap before it picked up again. But once it started steamrolling again, I tried my best to be involved as much as possible, and you're not getting rid of me anytime soon.
Perfect.
I'm going to claw my way into this project on and off camera as much as I can, as much as my free time allows. And then hopefully some other stuff that may or may not come soon. But it's a great community. I'm glad I found it. So join us.
Awesome. Appreciate having you here, Joe. And we got a new face. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Bart, or on the Discord Roxas, on Twitch Roxas. You can either call me Roxas, or Bart, whatever you prefer. I don't care. I found Sean's post on Roll20 with, hey, we're trying to build something new. We're trying to build something grand. And I was like, yeah, let's check this out. Let's check that out. So I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that I joined the Discord. I watched the stream of 2 weeks ago. I got a lot of information. I was like, okay, let's let my let's take some of those things and
Mm-hmm.
try to see what I can do. Send some things to Sean and started playing some games with Sean, and yeah, it went very quickly. And now on the stream, I will be mostly focusing on mechanics. That is the thing I like: mechanics and balancing. Making sure that next to the great world building, the role playing, there is also a good system of rules to facilitate it
Mm-hmm.
all. Further about myself, I'm from the Netherlands, so there's a bit of a time difference, but I can make it work. I'm 21 years old. I've done a lot of homebrew for D&D 5e. A lot of mechanics, a lot of just, hey, I have an idea, let's develop it, let's play a little bit with it,
Mm-hmm.
and how to bring all those skills to this project, and see if I can contribute the experiences I have, the skills I have, and make something great.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the project. We are missing a familiar face. Ben had an unfortunate medical situation come up and had to step down. So thoughts, prayers, whatever. He's dealing with some really big stuff and had to step back. I'm hoping that maybe in the future he can come back, but he was pretty adamant on focusing on his health and trying to get that on taken care of. So for now, we are not going to be seeing Ben. Hopefully, he can come back, but we are looking for new people. All right, so who we are in general. Um, we started off with a different name. We've rebranded. The intention for the channel is to keep growing. We rebranded to Total Tabletop, and we got some cool merch. If you guys want to support the channel, we got mugs, we got T-shirts, we got hoodies, we got stickers, lots of cool stuff. It's a great way to support the channel. If you guys are new to the channel, if you want to follow and click the notification bell, it will let you know when we go live each week. You can join the Discord. That is where we handle all the business side and also the personal side for all the communications. Link is down below. And then also on our YouTube channel, we catalog all of the content for all the shows. On Sundays, we have Ages Past, which is a D&D 5e campaign ran by AJ and his players. It's been going on, it's like mid 70s something for episodes. That's a great show. You guys can check that out. On Tuesdays, we have Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is ran by myself, and I have 4 players for that. 6:30 p.m. Pacific time is when all of the games take place. And then on Wednesdays, very, very soon, we're going to have Rise of Unity, and that is ran by DM Spaz. He has a group of players. One of them is myself and some other people involved in the channel. That is going to be starting here very soon. We finally have all of our character art done. We did our first one shot to test out everything. Very, very soon, we're actually going to be kicking off the Session 0 games. So be tuning in for that. That'll be on Wednesdays. And then Saturday mornings, we have World Building here, where we're going to continue this series of bringing in new developers and stuff like that, which hopefully you guys can get you on the team if you're interested and are qualified. So that's all the different things we have. We do have guild games. So what that is kind of like a pay-to-play structure. So it's another way to support the channel, but it's also a great way for us to get you guys to start playing with all of us. We have a lot of great people on staff, people who have been involved for a while, and they are putting together these side games and running them for our community. So if you guys are interested in that, you can jump into the Total Tabletop Guild channel and the Discord, and we can try to get you into the fold. Eventually that's going to go to a certain tier of subscribers, but right now we're opening it up to anybody who wants to play, get their curated character, and just have some fun with us. We love playing this game. I mean, it's the greatest game, and we all have that in common, is we love role-playing games. So we'd love to get meet you guys in that kind of format as well. I think that's it for admin stuff. Let's just get into the gist of it. Okay, so more details for the applicants. So we finally have the official application posted in there. Thank you, Rock Bart whichever we call you, for setting that up. So if you guys are here and watching this because you're wanting to apply for that, the application is now finally up. Sorry about the wait. With holidays and a bunch of things going on, it was a little bit delayed. But it is in there, so go ahead and fill that out, and we will contact you. And with that, we will set up times to do orientations, group interviews, all that stuff. So your first step is going to be to fill out that application, and we will reach out to you and be catching up on all the content for these episodes. Okay.
Are we gonna? Do they have to join the Discord, or are we gonna throw a link in the Twitch channel?
Yeah, if you just do !Discord, it'll pop up in the chat. So if one of you guys want to type that out real quick, it'll pop up.
I will do that.
Perfect. Okay. So.
Yeah, the application form is in world building. It should be pinned in the Discord in the world building text channel.
Perfect. And so there's going to be, once more people get involved, and this is open to anyone, it's generally accessible, so things might get lost. So all the important information are going to be the pinned things. So that will kind of tell you exactly what's going on, how it's going to take everything. So refer to the pinned ones for the important stuff. All right. All right, so the application, then we'll go into orientations, and which will take place on Saturdays after these streamed meetings. Moving forward, we'll designate some time for if you have applied and we are interested in getting to meeting you, we can do orientations, and that we'll go over expectations for what we're expecting from you, but also what you can expect from us. And then if all of that sounds good, then we'll move into group interviews. We've had some people inquire about intellectual control over information, so I just wanted to touch on that real quick. So just there eventually will be a formal NDA that everybody will be agreeing to. This just want to explain this briefly, and then we can move on from it. So the non-disclosure agreement will be assumed verbal for now. But eventually will just be a thing that everyone will sign. This is not a negative thing. This is actually a positive thing. So it's to protect the project, protect the channel. If people get involved and they contribute ideas, it belongs to the project, because sometimes we get some really good ideas, and if somebody does drop out for whatever reason, we don't want them to be able to mess up anything that we already have established. So that just means that if anybody does contribute anything, same thing with the chat, we'd love to get your guys' feedback. So once we get into actual developing, we're going to be monitoring the chat. So if you guys have any ideas or feedback, please feel free. We love getting the ideas, and that was the whole reason for streaming this week to week, is we want to get the community involvement as well. But just that goes for chat stuff as well. If you guys contribute an idea and we incorporate it, you can't later then say, oh no, you can't use that. It's free reign, essentially. So if it's a good idea, we're going to use it, and it's for the project. It's not for anything else like that. All right, that is all the admin thing. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Last week we said we were going to start off with talking about the races and classes, and then after we briefly go over that, then we're going to jump into mechanics, which is going to be the majority of the focus for this episode. All right, so let's jump straight into it. All right, races and classes. Joe, what do you want to start with out of those two?
Oh, I've got races in front of me, so we might as well start there.
Perfect. Okay, and all this is subject to change, just like everything else. We still need to look into, because we're going to be publishing our material, just assuming none of the names will change, or will stay the same. I don't know if we can legally use the word dwarf, gnome, kobold, all that stuff. So we'll be looking into the logistics of that. What do we actually physically call these races? Because we're wanting to have the hybrid of the fantasy with sci-fi. Definitely the races side we were wanting to pull from the fantasy side. So we're just going to use the working names for now. So we'll as we go through these, but these might change in the future for what they're called, but they're going to be based on the general assumptions. So we already talked about planets, and we touched a little bit on the races that will be there, but let's go through what we have for playable races. Do you want to just go through alphabetically?
Works for me.
All right. First of all, we have the Coloptera. So these are one of the underdeveloped playable races, but so far, what we've got. Do you want to go ahead and start grinding through each of these one at a time? Well, can I hop in there too?
Let's take them out. The Coleoptera are. I feel like I had more notes on this. They're essentially beetle people. So the idea that life for them evolved from beetles, and so they're medium-sized humanoids like everybody else, but they're going to have armored exteriors. Do you have the chart on who got what bonuses, or is that in the book?
That was in. That's gonna be in roll 20, and that was under. We'll still organizing everything.
You know what? It might be under the core. There we go. So the Coleoptera are on this list or not?
Game mechanics.
Can I have a new link to the document because you sent it in the previous Zoom call, so I can't get to it.
For the book?
For the book what you're showing, with the things you already written down.
Should be pinned, I think.
Oh, that's also a possibility. Let me look.
Yeah, it's pinned in the Discord.
We had
sorry.
some
Yeah.
detail in the playable races, and then the playable races tag after that. Is that what you're looking for, or was it somewhere else?
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I'm not seeing them there, but we had discussed it. Every race, as you're kind of familiar with from multiple systems, is going to have some stats, whatever we end up using ultimately as stats that are they're more inherently suited to. So we'll have to work out exactly what these guys are good at. We talked about them being hardier, but not necessarily as charismatic, I believe, just because they're giant bugs, but we'll have to revisit that as we are tweaking the races to all be fairly balanced. But they were kind of the manual labor folks on True Innis, where they are from, so they kind of do the literal heavy lifting on the planet.
All right, the starting elemental affinity options we were talking about was earth or water, is because they're from the planet of True Innis. So the playable races thing, we were talking about the two options for starting affinity are going to be based on the planet they come from. The players can pick one or the other, and then later on, when they are progressing their character, they could then pick a second affinity. We'll figure out when in the level system that will take place, and it could be whichever one that they wanted. And then we were also talking about the maximum starting stats, which we'll get into when we get to the mechanics. But what were we looking at possibly for the Coloptera? I think that was one of the ones that we changed. We replaced it. So that is one that we need to develop. Okay. So Planet of True Innis was tied in with Avalon with the medicine thing, which we touched on. I think majority of that was going to be based with the lizard folk type people, so we'll get more to that. So the Coloptera was one that we definitely needed to develop more. Was there any other working ideas that we had so far for these beetle folk?
Other than just the idea that they're kind of like the literal workers versus the political mind, and that they were a little more durable, possibly. We had discussed whether or not to give them a flight speed, but that's a mechanics question we haven't really got into. Whether, and if we do, how limited would it be? So they're definitely one of the ones that need some time and attention.
Some love, yep. Okay. All right, so that is the Coloptera, and we got some concept art. Again, we're going to be looking for artists eventually to draw our own versions of these races. So we're not using any copyrighted material, but for now we got placeholders, which will probably flag us for copyright. But it's all right. It's just a working project. All right. So next we have the Cuddle, which in the book it didn't have an image. So let me bring this one down real fast. All right, the Cuddle. These guys are interesting. So what do we got on them so far? These guys are definitely going to be different than the standards as well.
Yeah, the Cuddle. We have them hailing from Sakar, the Steam world. They kind of are a rapidly developing race.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the working idea is that kind of abandoned Terran facilities on the planet, whether they were abandoned for so long they malfunctioned or they were malfunctioning so they were abandoned, um, just kind of leaked radiation into the water, kind of permanently creating this irradiated water, which affected life in various ways,
Mm-hmm.
including the Cuddle, which kind of accelerated their metabolism and life and shortened their lifespan. So they're kind of you've got multiple generations at once, so you're kind of building on knowledge more quickly
Mm-hmm.
than our society has, just based on our time to do so. So they kind of rapidly have grown from just fish to these sentient, intelligent, kind of just masters of machinery. They are dependent on that radiated water,
Mm-hmm.
so they have to reside there, but they kind of have built using the first gen tech would have been environmental suits left behind by the Terrans that they found they could interact with, and then using those to build more and more sophisticated things. So a Cuddle that is not on Sakar or is out of the water will be in their own self-contained little environmental sphere
Mm-hmm.
that then interacts with various suits is the idea. So we have multiple models in mind and they could be expanded upon or reduced, but the idea being one that is small, nimble, lots of limbs, so it can move around kind of rapidly, handle multitasking, a more traditional humanoid suit, kind of like what we're showing there,
Mm-hmm.
that you would imagine the player spends most of the time in, because most technology outside of their world is built to accommodate people who walk upright and have two
Humanoid.
arms.
Yeah. Yep.
So to adapt to the surrounding worlds, they built that, and then the idea being a much larger war machine that they could plug themselves into
Mm-hmm.
that will probably only be available on Sakar, at least for a player standpoint. It's probably not, unless we find one way broken. I don't know. We haven't really worked it out, but the idea being that there's this very epic war machine. The Cuddle are a militarily advanced society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we really like the idea of having these guys be different than instead of like a dwarf who can do all these different things, that them physically as a race are completely dependent on their technology. Outside of the water, they will, you know, start to die. So they're going to be restrained to these little orbs, and then the orbs themselves can be transferred from suit to suit, like you're saying. Perfect. So it'd be really cool to when we finally have the concept art of different, V suits that we were talking about. To how the ball can transfer from suit to suit. So we still need to work out exactly what that's going to mean for if it's a playable race. What's that going to mean for the class structure? Do we have its own thing, or do we, in this medium-sized suit, it just becomes a humanoid who can then be the rest of the classes? That's probably what we're going to go with, but we had talked about the possibility of it having its own thing. I would rather stick away from that, so we'll figure out exactly how it's going to be. But yeah, that's the idea for the Cuddle. Should be super fun. They'll have kind of a telepathic link to the technology, kind of thinking like the Iron Man suits with the AI, like the interface that Tony Stark can kind of interact with, and it's getting the suit itself is providing a bunch of information that he normally couldn't see just by himself. So kind of like that idea of like a HUD that's part of the bubble But what gets the information that's getting fed to the HUD of this bubble is based on the suit that it's connected to. So the things that the cuddle has access to and what it can do is going to be based on the suit that the sphere is directly connected to. So this one definitely is going to need a lot of work, and as we move on to that part of development, should be a lot of fun.
Just keep them away from the mainframe. Man, keep them away from the mainframe.
Awesome. Okay, the dark elves. So, they will hail from Othea, the storm planet, and they'll have the affinity options of water or lightning starting off. So we were talking about pulling references from the Drow for these guys. Um, give us a little detail again about the differences between the elves and the dark elves, Joe, for the planet.
Yeah, so anyone who watched last episode, there's a lot in there, but
Mm-hmm.
Athea kind of has harnessed this environmental adaptation tech to kind of just control the storms on the planet to make their area habitable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Early on in their history, conflict between the two sons of the emperor led to a split, with one being exiled to kind of like the stormlands. I'm not sure we've given it a proper name,
Mm-hmm.
but over time, just the different adapting to their environments, you get the branches of the traditional elves and the dark elves, kind of one living inside the storm, the other holding it aside.
Mm-hmm. So with the traditional elves, which we'll touch on in a little bit, we were thinking more of the kind of high elf kind of influence, and then the dark elf being kind of a hybrid between wood elf and drow. So it won't exactly be a drow. It'll be kind of our own take on it. So more of the dexterous dexterous side, and then the lower stat was con. So, which we'll touch base more when we get to some of the mechanical ideas that we have for how these races are going to affect mechanics. But all of those are still just concepts because we need to actually start working on actual mechanics portion of it. But that's what we're leaning to so far. Awesome. Um, Next is going to be, actually, you know what? Instead of going alphabetical, we're already talking about elves, so let's go ahead and jump to that one.
Yeah. So as you were saying, that kind of the inspiration drawn from the high elf. These are the elves descended from the brother that did not get exiled. He stayed and led the existing empire.
Mm-hmm.
They have the benefit of this technology that kind of adapts the storm around their living spaces, keeping it at bay. It helps defend the planet since the storms are so wild. They can open up an access point for a ship to come down or not. So they kind of control the majority of interplanetary travel via that technology. They were kind of be more intelligence and wisdom based instead of the dex and con, instead of surviving in a harsher environment. They're getting by on smarts. They have fire or earth.
Mm-hmm.
Or did we? Yeah, fire or earth is their
No,
potentials.
no, that was wrong in the book. Yeah, that was,
Okay, that just needed to change. I was reading.
yeah,
I was like, that doesn't make sense. They should have the same options: water or lightning. It's the
water
same
lightning. Yeah,
planet,
let me
so they
fix
have
that
the
real quick.
same source material to draw from, and they'll kind of be more of a structured society, more time for art and culture, less time spent on survival. Um, we haven't nailed it down, but if I recall, we talked about the Dark Elves being a little bit more nomadic, moving around, adapting to the storm
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, and the regular elves were more dug into their dynasty and their temple or whatever the main city was going to be. Um, and the book just edited it. So as we move forward, what you guys see on the screen, we will be editing as we develop week to week. The book is going to be accessible for people who come onto the dev team. So that's one of the things during orientation. If you guys get put on the team, we'll give you guys access to. so you guys can see the working stuff, as well as we are working in Roll20 to build stuff. We might be switching to Foundry. I'm not sure yet, but so things will change on screen as we develop. So I just edited that with the elves. Perfect. Okay. So, all right.
Can jump back up to the Dark Orcs.
Sure. Yeah, whatever order you
Since that
want.
was next in the normal alphabetical, these guys are from Athelon. So that's the dust planet. It's been ravaged by this plague. They're dependent on Truinus for the cure,
Mm-hmm.
which is also an addictive drug. So you've got an entire planet of crippling drug addicts.
Mm-hmm.
The for now called Dark Orcs are living on the surface of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
They're hunters, um, not only of animals, they kind of raise beasts with the help of the regular orcs who can help grow them to massive proportions to sell meats, but they hunt animals on the planet. But also, a large number of these guys become bounty hunters. It's kind of the most successful path you can take in a
Mm-hmm.
society where it's pretty rigid and controlled who can advance, because the wealth controls the cure, which controls your day-to-day existence. So we have these guys kind of being hardy at the moment, constitution based, and less so charisma, um, with the affinity options for the planet being air or earth, as it is the dust planet. These would be the descendants of the kind of the overworlders who kind of stayed intermingled with people from off planet, rather than those who had started to get to the safety of the underground before
Mm-hmm.
kind of the disaster that struck the exploding star kind of ravaged the surface, only barely not wiping out all life, thanks to the Emperor kind of seeing it coming and
Mm-hmm.
taking steps to avoid it. We've got some concept ideas of some giant bison
Mm-hmm.
type creatures that might be native to the planet. So these guys have their established cities near water sources because life is scarce on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about kind of a tribal aspect they kind of move between, with essentially a holy site where the Emperor's castle once was.
Okay. And the higher stat would be con, and the lower stat would be charisma, whatever that means. That was the working idea. And then they would have the starting affinities of air or earth because of the planet they hail from. All right. So the other. Want to just jump to orcs then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Same idea as elves, makes sense. So these guys have adapted to life underground. This was a group of orcs that had started kind of securing knowledge from the palace at a time they thought the emperor was going crazy. Turns out he wasn't. He was right on the nose. But
Mm-hmm.
they kind of took advantage of the cavern system to kind of create these vaults to store the collected knowledge that was in the palace, as well as anything else that is important. And these guys have kind of become the place if you've got something that needs to be secured, stored as securely as possible. So that's part of how they affect the worlds outside their own. But the regular orcs have kind of adapted to like that, the darker environment. They grow mushrooms that help grow
Mm-hmm.
the beasts to massive size. They can kind of refine the cure into this extra potent drug trip, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're still going to be earth or air because they're from the same planet,
Mm-hmm.
but rather than a higher stat of con and then lower of charisma, they're strong. The strength is their higher stat, with constitution being the lower. They live in, I believe our idea there is they live in tight pack society. Disease is more rampant there. They're
Mm-hmm.
not getting as much, fresh air, but they're kind of the wiser, more artistic half to the overworld's kind of more brute survival.
Right.
And in some ways mirroring that duality that the two elves
Sure.
have.
Awesome. All right. So that is the gist of the orcs. All right. So dwarfs.
Dwarves. I mean, dwarves are dwarves. They're heavily inspired with the traditional fantasy dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
hail from Dragua, the lava planet. So this was, if you recall the last episode, where the races of giants and dragons once held sway, enslaving the dwarves and kobolds, respectively. But a massive war erupted. The dragons helped the dwarves gain their freedom, and they took over the working of the forges and evicted the kobolds.
Mm-hmm.
So they can make the strongest materials of anyone in the galaxy. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
we've defined exactly what
No,
the
we
space
haven't.
system is,
Yeah.
but of all the planets, they can make the strongest materials
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the best craftsmanship because they have access to these forges that are fed right from the lava and, of course, magical dragon eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we've decided that wisdom was their higher stat, just kind of that knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
tradesmanship and craftsmanship, past knowledge, and then intelligence being their lower. Fire or earth are the affinities available to those from Dragua,
Mm-hmm.
and these guys are kind of led by a forcibly elected council. It's kind of the thing where you take your turn being in charge, but you don't necessarily want to be. They wear these armbands that represent who's in charge, and their beef with the Minotaur means if you're wearing one of those off planet, you better not see a Minotaur because now you're a target.
Right. They're gonna have that dichotomy of uh, either being in fear of these off-world minotaurs who are going to have those armbands on their horns, either be afraid of them or extremely hostile, like if there's groups of them. So that'll be some fun ways to have suggested role-playing ways for the racial interactions, which will definitely divulge more for all of the races. What do each of them think of each other, and that will be kind of stem for the relationship between the planets that they hail from. So, like with the dwarves, some of these races are more fleshed out than others. We'll get them all caught up, but with the dwarves, we do know that there's going to be some kind of relationship with the kobolds because they were kicked off planet of Dragua and they relocated to Iria. So we'll have to figure out how dwarves feel about the kobolds. There's going to be a working relationship between the dwarves and the Cuddle from Sakar because Sakar's their main client for purchasing the metals that they craft on Dragua and the forges left over from the fire giants that we had talked about. Um, so we have a little bit fleshed out for that. We some of these racial stat modifiers might seem a little odd if you're basing off of comparing straight from D&D, which exactly what we're wanting. We're wanting it to not be your typical stat. Like we're wanting to do a different way of looking at these races based on our own system and our own worlds that we're fleshing out. So if looking at a dwarf and you're seeing the not traditional stat modifications, that's exactly what we're going for. Cool. All right, so that was dwarfs. So since we're on Dragua, we're not going alphabetical. I don't know why I even said that. Should we just go to Kabul now at this point? Just go planet to planet?
Well, alphabetical made sense until, you know, there's interconnected races. Yes,
Sure.
kobolds makes lots of sense.
Okay.
Where we be? Yes, kobolds. Also originally from Dragua, but have since been kicked off to Iria and have adapted to life there. They were originally slaves to the dragon race. After the war ended, the dwarves weren't about to be slavers themselves because they were also slaves to giants. But they won the war. It's their planet. Get off. So the kobolds were kind of forcibly removed, relocated. So we've got to deal with the aftermath of how they feel about that. Did any manage to stay? How much they know about the dragon eggs, and we've gone a little bit into kind of the underground resistance movements to what the dwarves are doing with those dragon eggs. They have Iria's affinity options, so air or fire, as they are the smoke planet. We gave them the dexterity as their primary stat, with strength being the lower one, where they, like the gnomes, are small, but they are nimble.
Okay. All right, and then yeah, this possible smuggling of the dragon eggs from Dragua to the vaults that are on Avalon. So we got that part to flesh out, and how they feel about dwarves and how they feel about orcs. So we got some leads on some of those. Okay. We skipped lizard folk. We can go ahead and touch on those real quick since we already talked about Truinus, but this would be the other main race for the wood planet Truinus. You want to touch on those?
Yeah, so the lizard folk would be kind of more the political face of the Truinus planet. We haven't really decided if there's equal governance between the two and how much the Coleoptera were involved with the decision to turn the cure into a drug. But we definitely know the lizard folk were involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea being that it happened long enough ago that few, if any, truly remember that. It wasn't a widespread decision. It was made, and then the secret was kept. So now they've just become this interdependent community of two planets working to keep the other alive, or in this case, enslaved a little to that drug. Um, we gave them, in part based on that kind of ability to pull this ultimate con, charisma as their higher stat, with wisdom being the lower. Truinus, of course, is the wood planet, so that's a combination of water and earth, so those are their affinity options. Um, these guys, was Truinus the home to? Yeah, this is a home to one of the guilds, so you'll see their presence in that book pretty heavily. The Aquas Guild, I believe. Yeah. So they're going to be involved in the commerce, which makes sense based on their just kind of established trade.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what am I leaving out? I feel like there's more I need to say, but
Kind of just, yeah, there's still a lot to develop on each of these. We're just kind of just giving a general idea of each of these, and then as you know, week to week, we actually are developing once everything's caught up. So this was just kind of a familiarization, and then we'll eventually get to actually fleshing these bad boys out.
Absolutely.
All right, so gnomes.
Gnomes. These guys are from the smoke planet, so affinity options are air or fire, similar to kobolds. They are in this kind of superficial society where if you're trending, you're in power, essentially. Popularity holds sway. So they're all about being the face. Charisma is their higher stat. They are, like the kobolds, a little smaller. Strength is their lower. The gnomes are interesting in that they're split based on gender pretty heavily. It's a matriarchal society, so the kind of empress is just the most popular woman on the planet. What she likes and dislikes heavily influences what other gnome women are into, and some of the political echelon just kind of use that to influence things in ways that benefit them, just kind of making comments to her to sway her opinion in ways they need, whereas the gnomes are kind of the male gnomes are subservient on the face of it, but it also allows for this underground society of male gnomes who want to even the playing field, or maybe reverse it. So we're going to see kind of that dual society. The idea of these guys, because it's a smoky planet, it's not the most pleasant, supports life, but they are interacting with the Cuddle, buying kind of this virtual reality gear from them to kind of Ready Player One style, have this alternate world where you can spend most of your time. You work to be in the game, you are in the game to get popular, and you're getting popular to gain actual influence. So the game is in many ways as real as the real life, because it's what shapes
if not more
society.
so. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So their kind of affinity with that tech. The male gnomes underground are also kind of where a lot of cybernetics come from, and he's kind of like sci-fi prosthetic limbs and things are them tinkering to kind of sell where they can to raise the funds to then try and even that score, rise up. So we'll see that. It also ties them to the plasma fields where they do a lot of their testing on
the prisoners we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to phrase. I was like, is unwilling the right word? It's probably
Voluntold.
voluntold, more
Yeah.
extreme than that. So problem prisoners are given over to the gnomes to then do with what they will, which then shapes a whole other Junker society. So these guys are pretty fairly tied in to several places, and that's exactly what we're going to do with everybody. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's just fleshed out, but they're going to be tied multiple ways so that the world feels interconnected.
Awesome. So it was air and fire affinity, charisma higher, strength lower. Um, awesome. Okay, Goliaths.
Goliaths, they are from Shiva, the ice planet. So we're kind of splitting the planet into two camps,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the traditionalists and the modernists.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that roughly correlates to hemisphere. Obviously, nothing is a perfect split in any scenario, but
Mm-hmm.
on the northern hemisphere, where the actual spaceport is, they're kind of directly seeing the benefits of new technologies and interplanetary trade and reaping those benefits. They're leaning towards modernization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Goliaths live on this floating iceberg town, or each tribe does. They have multiple icebergs, their ships, their homes, they're kind of where life happens. The whole planet is cold, but a lot of it is water, with land being at the poles, and then these massive icebergs where Goliaths kind of travel around hunting the waters
Mm-hmm.
for fish, which they can then sell to the Minotaurs, who we'll get to since they share the planet. Whereas the modernists are equipping their icebergs with engines technology
Mm-hmm.
to make them faster. It's also causing the icebergs to melt.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to get in and out. They have to make more frequent trips, but they can go out farther, take some higher risks. The planet itself is going to be, um, they're all going to have their pitfalls, but this
Mm-hmm.
one's nature is going to be pretty dangerous. There's the idea of like a kraken or a leviathan monster that
Mm-hmm.
will come up to feed and can wipe out these Goliaths if they're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of expel what they didn't digest, which just kind of, so seagulls on the horizon, to get out of Dodge. Whereas the traditionalists are kind of using nature to the advantage. The idea is something akin to a dragon turtle
Mm-hmm.
will be their sheepdog, war mounts, uh, carriage horses. They're all around pack animal
Mm-hmm.
that kind of pulls their icebergs, helps them hunt, and when those die off, shells provide armor for the icebergs
Mm-hmm.
that are kind of being more propelled by knowing the currents, and then these animal handlers pulling the way. We gave them a higher stat of constitution. It's cold, it's rough living. They're adapted to this harsh environment. And then we gave them intelligence as their lower stat, as they're mostly either using traditional methods or
Mhm.
adapting to things other people built. Ice planet Shiva is water and air elemental affinities, so those will be the starting options for Goliaths.
Awesome. And then, PCs, once they get to the planet of Shiva and they're starting to learn about the glass or whatever, it's going to be very quickly identifiable which of the type of Goliath that they're dealing with, because, like, for instance, the ice fortresses, that they're going to be completely different. Well, one of them's getting more modernized with engines, while one of them is being pulled by an actual um, turtle dragon thing that we talked about. So yeah, that'd be fun to flesh out the two differences of this race. We're looking forward to that one. So let's go to the cousin race for the planet, which would be the Minotaurs for Shiva.
Yes, the Minotaurs stick primarily to the poles where the actual land is,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being on the icebergs as much. That's their primary method of getting between the poles if they need them, but they like the land. They are not swimmers. They have the same air or water affinity options, being from the same planet, but these guys kind of have learned to harness the elemental forces at the poles to shape and build icebergs, rather than the Goliaths having to find naturally occurring ones and hollow them out. They've worked with the Minotaurs to kind of get these ready-made, purpose-built
Mm-hmm.
models, so they're just more effective, pre-made. and they trade the fish they hunt for those services. Again, kind of split along the divide, whereas the southern hemisphere, farther away from the spaceport, is more traditional. These Minotaurs aren't going to like the introduction of the new engines and the new tech. They're worried it's going to heat up the planet and reduce the amount of land for them.
Sure.
Minotaurs of the north are seeing the new options they have when kind of creating those icebergs, the chance to get off planet more easily and go out. And we've already kind of talked about the dwarven connection Minotaurs. There's a just pre-standing animosity between the two, whereas some Minotaurs will leave the planet just to try and hunt the council dwarves to wear those armbands on their horns.
So obviously, once this is all done, GMs can, I almost said DMs, let me say D&D. GMs can work with their players and do anything that they want, but the suggested thing for Minotaurs would be the PCs. If you're a player character and you pick Minotaur, you probably are going to be suggested to be from the northern hemisphere, because you're going off-world, you're using the tech, stuff like that. It wouldn't really fit into being a southern hemisphere Minotaur, because they would stay on planet. But again, if somebody can come up with a cool backstory reason for they want to be a southern hemisphere Minotaur who is more traditional, totally cool. It would just be up to the game master to incorporate the reasoning of why they are embracing the northern hemisphere way of life. So we'll have to come up with the suggested reasons for that. So that'll be a lot of fun to address as well. So yeah, they headhunt the dwarves. So you'll see the different arm rings kind of stacked up on the horns. We had talked about, just for physical aesthetics, that their hooves will kind of be like horse hooves, just flat. But that is not very conducive for ice movement. So they carve spikes into the hooves, just so they can grip the ice very, very well. So they'll be able to move very quickly on their native surface. But the off-planet traveling Minotaurs obviously won't need that. But to keep up with the physical look, they'll kind of paint their hooves, their normal hooves, to look like they still have spikes, so little, like the little triangles on there, so they appear to be spiked. I think that was kind of a cool idea that we had talked about.
Yeah, I like it, especially because it does technically means that Minotaurs wear toenail polish.
Oh, yep, exactly.
Makes me laugh. It just now, but I'm just picturing them as like Shetland ponies, like the northern element horses, just super shaggy.
I love it. Yeah, they got like dreadlocks or long flowing like Rapunzel hair. That's awesome. Yeah.
Get a Minotaur to do a whatever that shampoo commercial is. You always see the hair flowing.
Oh, the Head and Shoulders.
Yeah.
No, L'Oreal.
There you go.
L'Oreal.
Yeah. I love
just Minotaur hipsters. I'm not modern. I'm traditional.
The party's trying to go along with the quest, and he's gonna be like, "Wait a minute, I have to apply some new toenail polish." Like, I can't.
I have
seen.
to look
Yeah.
amazing.
I chipped a nail. I got. Which will be a fun characteristic, because they're the strength, the super strong, brawny, just brutes, and then they have that, the physical side. That'd be a lot of fun.
I work out, but I'm also in touch with my emotional side.
Amazing. All right, so that is the down and dirty of the Minotaurs. Where are we going to next?
I think we've run through it, and we're down to Terran.
Yeah, we can go Terran.
Yeah, only Terran and Zed left.
Yeah, Terran. So these are
Shardbind. We haven't done Shardbind yet either.
We just recalled them Zed, but yeah.
Zed. Sorry. Yep.
So the Terrans are the humans of this world. They live in a kind of giant space station in Solaris 8, which is the magnet-influenced area, so air and lightning. They're working on terraforming a world to live on because their homeworld is gone. The plasma fields, the plasma wastes, whatever we call them, used to be their home. That's where they originated from, but they were destroyed when the star blew up, which directly ties them to several places. Avalon felt the effects of that when their surface was ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Cuttle were present because a rogue Terran kind of tried to uh, and did abscond with a shipment of that strong metal from the dwarves, the only one to ever do so, and the Cuttle responded full force. And it's assumed that the star exploding was the Cuttle's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting by in reputation because really most of their military was wiped out in the resulting explosion, and are frantically trying to rebuild that while riding the wave of, yeah, we'll blow your planet up, man. Don't mess with us.
Mm-hmm.
But the Terrans, all those connections aside, were already in the process of kind of setting up this let's go build a new colony somewhere mode. So essentially it's down to everyone who's they could get off planet when the sun was going to explode, and those who are already there making their way out of Dodge. So they live on this, I believe we found the term was armillary sphere. So there's just all these rings,
Mm-hmm.
just in tighter and tighter diameters. So the internal rings are the older original structures that were then built out. So people live, technically, the outside of the ring is their floor, since the spinning makes their gravity. And then the exterior of each ring is weaponized to defend the giant station. They live in a very regimented society. Essentially, every citizen a soldier. Everyone's got rank,
Mm-hmm.
and rank is both a political maneuver and based on merit. So you earn your way to the top, but at the same time, as you get to those higher levels, you're also trying to manipulate events to put yourself in a position to rise higher, because rank is everything. If you're having a dispute, higher rank wins. It's just it.
Right.
And higher rank gets you better quarters, other perks. The whole station is kind of modular. They can move things around as needed so you can get a better view. Um, they also, in the wastes, kind of took advantage of that. That's where spacefaring fuel comes from. Interplanetary travel was happening, but this is the highest quality space fuel you can get. We've kind of come up with these interstellar whale type creatures
Mm-hmm.
that just live and breathe in space. They were attracted by the exploded star. They feed on that and then process it internally. And so collecting that waste product and refining it into fuel is the most effective way of powering spaceflight.
Mm-hmm.
So they fled to survive, but they're also industrialists and opportunists. So they picked that area to build just this remote supermax prison for their own people.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the others, dregs of society from all the other planets, are kept there. They run that as a business to kind of power and fund, that's the word, fund their society,
Mm-hmm.
but also the collecting of that space fuel and manufacture of it. Less so their own people off-world of theirs will get sent there, but in a society where you have to control the population, disease can be a problem. You have to shut down sections of the station, and survival of the whole is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure you have enough food, enough medicine. If some crime is capital punishment,
Exactly.
steal something, dead. Attack your neighbor, dead. If there's a witness and somebody with the authority, we're just going to do it right now.
Yep.
We have to survive.
Right.
So it's a very rigid, inflexible lifestyle, but it's also, kind of on the roots of that, pulled up by your bootstraps. If you can achieve it, you will be rewarded.
Mm-hmm. So with the connection with the planets that we have so far, that's going to give them a connection to the male gnomes from Iria because of the prison and the experiments that are taking place with, prisoners of the system from all races, the experimentation for the body modifications, the alterations, stuff like that. And then also the uh, connection with the Cuddle, since the Cuddle were presumed to be responsible for the destruction of their home planet. So I think Terrans would have uh, a kind of hate for the Cuddle, just right off the bat. Of course, that could be customized, by the player, but that would be kind of the recommended thing. Let's see what else.
Well, one thing you guys talked about in the previous session was the Terrans are connected to magnetics, and
Mm-hmm.
a space station would be a major space travel hub because the magnetic powers allow them to maglev, or like what is the other cannon called? Uh,
The Gauss cannon.
Oh, the cannon that uses magic magnets to accelerate
Railgun.
the railgun. Yeah,
Right.
using railguns to get you up to speed, so it is more efficient to be launched from there and then burn fuel instead of getting up to speed and leaving an atmosphere.
Sure.
So it would be a hub for people. Oh, we're close to the space station. Fly first there, get into a launch area, and it get launched towards the planet we're heading to.
Sure.
Yeah, they are the hub of the transit guild,
Mm-hmm.
able to get people around, and also the main source of that high quality fuel. So
Awesome. And then the last playable race is the Shard Mind idea, but we were calling them Zed. Zed are from Zed, and they care only about Zed. So yeah, these guys have been a lot of fun. What do we got for them so far?
the Zed are inorganic material given sentience. The idea at the moment is that there are places on Zed where just the structure of the caves focuses kind of sunlight through these crystals, and if it hits just this a stalagmite pile of rock long enough, it will eventually infuse it with sentience and life. So these guys aren't reproducing themselves; they are just naturally occurring,
Mm-hmm.
coming from the planet, um, and they. It doesn't happen super often. They live quite a while, but they don't reproduce super frequently. They've kind of developed a society where rules are made to benefit everybody. They're pretty evenly split. There hasn't been a lot of reason to fight over space or resources. And in fact, they like to intermingle. The idea is that a Rolling Stone gathers no moss, but really the Rolling Stone gathers more stone, I guess. You
Right.
got to increase your Zed. So they want to get crystal from new places as they grow and adapt to the world.
Mm-hmm.
The original concept was that they could kind of at will shape the planet around them,
Mm-hmm.
which we've come away from. They
Mm-hmm.
will kind of, upon whatever age is coming of age for them, they get kind of a piece of the planet that is their Zed that they can shape. They have a limited quantity of material that they can adapt to their current situation,
Mm-hmm.
but they do shape the planet slowly. It's kind of like the idea that they are its shepherds, their tenders. So cities are just massive crystalline structures that have been shaped by many Zed over many years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was found once they kind of were introduced to the intergalactic community at large that the crystals of their planet were stronger than glass, so good for winds like viewing ports on a spaceship,
Mm-hmm.
but also could store significant energy and kind of generate atmosphere around a ship, making travel safer.
Mm-hmm.
If someone was to get ejected from a smaller ship nearby, they wouldn't just immediately suffocate, kind of thing, and just generally help power the other systems of the ship besides actual fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys, some of them leave the planet to go the extreme of that, see new places, acquire new things, and many are just attending to the planet. And kind of the crux of the planet we already talked about last week is just the idea that too much crystal is leaving.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of slowing down the advancement of their society at a level that is just now being felt.
Mm.
So these guys are very interconnected with their own people and kind of sense each other on some level. We gave them wisdom is their primary stat. They're very connected to each other and their planet, but they are rock and don't necessarily get other folks that aren't rock. So we gave charisma as their lower stat.
Mm-hmm.
The crystal planet is lightning or earth as their affinity options. So those are their choices there.
Awesome. And we had talked about the possibility of not necessarily like a hive mind, but these guys would be telepaths. They don't have a physical mouth because their head is crystal. They'll have eyes and everything like that, but they don't have mouths, so they would communicate telepathically. So that's something we'd have to flesh out exactly how that's going to work. But then that extends to also if a Zed dies, however, a crystal dies off world, there'll be some kind of trace location that Zed can use to find them, and the idea is to return a Zed back to Zed to reincorporate it back into Zed.
Yes, we had one of the more recent ideas, the idea that they reincarnate. So bringing their experiences and their knowledge and their material back to the planet is part of that cycle.
Mm-hmm. So
how you could do it is like they vibrate. They have a frequency.
Some resonance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they can communicate. And if they're off world, that's how you can find them. All the Zeds can feel that resonance and find all the Zeds. And when they bring it back, the crystal, even though the consciousness is gone, the crystal still vibrates, and a Zed can understand the experiences that crystal has gone through.
And the
That's
name
the way
of
to go with.
Yeah, and the name of that resonance coming off of a Zed's Zed would also be called Zed.
Yep.
So
everything
Zed
important is called Zed.
Yeah, the Zeds from Zed have a Zed, and then once they die, will resonate Zed, making other Zed want to return the Zed's Zed back to Zed.
Yeah, this is gonna be a lot of fun when you're role playing. I am Zed from Zed. I will always be Zed. I always will return to Zed. But be aware, Zed will always be Zed.
Oh, it should be a lot of fun. Really confusing for some people, but a lot of fun for others. Awesome. Okay, so that was the playable races. Talked a little bit about the elemental affinities of each one, the idea for the racial modifications. Still a lot to go with that. But we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we'll start touching on what we're looking at for classes. And what we're doing is there's two approaches for this. Either start completely from scratch or use reference material to kind of slingshot moving forward. So that's what we're going to be doing. So it's going to be Starfinder. So if anybody's familiar with Starfinder, that is going to be what we're going to be talking about. Now, the plan, which we'll get more into when we get back, is we're going to talk about what they are in Starfinder just to kind of lay a foundation. And then we want to take that and morph it into what would be applicable for our system. So a lot of that tweaking hasn't taken place yet, but we're going to start with the basics. We'll tell, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel sometimes. You can take already working things that have been play tested and use that as the starting point. So when we come back, we're going to go through each of the classes that the players can choose, and we'll go through those systematically one by one. And then lastly, for this week, once we do that, then we're going to start getting into the actual core mechanics. We have some ideas that we really liked. We'll go into what we had for that, as well as Bart had some ideas to contribute to as well, and we'll actually start getting into the developing and actually start making changes, not just talk about things that we've already done, but we got to get everybody caught up. So we'll be back in a couple minutes. Hope everybody's having a good time, and we'll see you in a minute. All right, we are back. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. Now we are going to jump into the classes portion of it. And as I mentioned earlier, having a base to go off of is always a good idea. So we have a couple variations, mechanical influences that we know for sure that we want to implement. But in case anybody's unfamiliar with the Starfinder classes, we'll kind of run through the ones that we like and we're going to be pulling off of. But before we do that, kind of touch on the idea of all the population. We got to figure out how many people are in the known system, figure out what the populations of the planets are going to be. But we like the idea of 1 in 1,000 people, no matter the race, give or take, of all people have the elemental affinity. And those individuals will be sought after by the guilds. They're kind of like chosen ones. We don't have it established, is it a genetic thing? Is it a random thing? What sets these people apart? But these people are going to have the ability to connect with the magics of the universe and set them apart from everyone else. So all PCs, all adventurers would be of these elemental affinity peoples, no matter their race. So we're talking about 1 in 1,000-ish. So that'll help with kind of deciding the population, because we also, one of the other races that we didn't touch on, or no, I guess it'd be classes. Excuse me, classes. So we will actually start with the mystics, because we're not quite sure exactly what this is going to mean, but these are going to be a very big staple in the guilds and the system as a whole. So if 1 in 1,000 peoples have the elemental affinity, of those 1 in 1,000 of the elemental affinities are what we're calling mystics. So the mystical people, whether it's genetic mutation or whatever, they are kind of the next evolution or stage of progression, and so they're going to have a one step further kind of thing. And we were talking about having the main core of the guilds at the higher echelon being composed of these mystics, and so there's probably like the elitism, and the formation of the guilds is to acquire those elementally attuned people and bring them together in a coalition. And an agenda that the mystics will have beyond that is to also find more mystics to bring into into the fold of the upper echelon. So we got to still figure out exactly how much will be public knowledge versus what the DM would know. We don't have that established yet. So obviously it's still going to be all spoilers. All of this is all spoilers for all of you guys. But there might be things that the GMs will know. Probably going to be involving some of the mystic stuff like that. So we had 3 concepts for the mystics, which we'll go into in just a second. Not sure if we want to make these a playable class or not. It would definitely, I think we're going to build it to where they're going to be NPC type, like story progressing classes for those higher NPC characters, but they could also be a playable race based on the GM's discretion. So they're definitely going to be much more powerful. It's going to be kind of akin to if you run a Star Wars game. The differences between Jedi and your scoundrels or your regular stuff, they don't really scale balanced wise. Jedi will get beyond the capability, like you quickly become in a different league than the best of anyone else. I mean, how good of a rogue smuggler can you become when this other guy can move things with his mind and has these powers and things like that? So there's a huge scaling difference. So that's why Mystics may not be recommended as a playable class because it's going to be exponential growth. So these 1 in 1,000 elementally affinity people are going to be so much more beyond regular folk. These mystics would be even, above and beyond that. So is that a balanced thing? Probably not. So we're going to have to either wrestle with how to balance it so it is usable, or keep it unbalanced on purpose and just leave it as a plot device, or a GM to incorporate however they like.
Well, I would say like keep it in, make it good, well structured, so GMs can make mystics for their own game with these templates, or if you want a power trip campaign, make all your players mystics.
Exactly.
And let them fuck up the star system, the planetary system, the galaxy, whatever scope is going to be decided on.
Yeah, I think that'd be the way to run it, is either a whole party of mystics and break the game, change the universe, kind of a feel for a game, or have none. Having one with the rest, I don't think would be balanced unless everybody agreed to it. But I think that would definitely need to be explained in the material, advising GMs to try to not run both. Either run suggested none. If you want to have them, great, but the whole party should be it, kind of a thing. So that could be kind of that. Even though this is a low fantasy mixed with sci-fi, that would be kind of the high fantasy extremism where these people are going to be able to be, essentially like could maybe push a planet or a small moon, or you know what I mean, like scale up to that kind of thing, which is way beyond everybody else. But I don't know, we'll get to that. But the Mystics had the telepaths branch, the telekinetic, and the teleporter. So we have some things that we had planned for that. And then this is kind of a good one to kind of dip into first, to kind of explain how the elemental affinity will affect the class. And so we want to kind of take this concept and apply it to all the other classes that we're going to be talking about from Starfinder. For the Mystics, the primary attribute is Wisdom. Secondary attribute would be Charisma for Telepaths, Constitution for Telekinetics, and Dexterity for Teleporters. Um, so in the elemental affinities portion, real quick, Joe, do you want to break down the 5 elements, what they are, and the general influence that will have into each of the classes, no matter what the class is?
Sure. So we've kind of been touching on elemental affinity throughout the races.
Mm-hmm.
All the planets stem from kind of a commingling of two elements. There are 5 core that we have. So fire, air, earth, lightning, and water are the 5 core. Each planet is touched by 2, so there are 10 planets. And then that determines your starting affinity. These affinities will kind of give you access to some magical abilities based on the element. As you get a second affinity later on, that'll let you be able to blend the two in certain ways, kind of come up with some new magics based on having 2 elements,
Mm-hmm.
or you could double dip into the same and just get more powerful versions
Mm-hmm.
of what you already had. But the idea is that since everyone's going to have elemental affinity, that can kind of change how the class works a little.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of looking at each class through the lens of your affinity. So, we've broken it down that fire will be the affinity of fire will be about damage. So, more damage at once, damage over time, area of effect damage, damage of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Air is about controlling the battlefield, so move more quickly, swap places with people, restrict other people's movements, things like that. Earth is protective, so giving yourself resistance or make it hard to hit, pull up a shield, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Damage
Lightning,
mitigation. Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lightning was about buff and debuff, so you'll be able to, depending on the class, it'll affect your abilities, and then however those abilities would empower someone or empower yourself, or how they might steal advantages from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then water would be about healing. So whether that means you have additional health, or you can steal health, or you heal over time, um, it'll put that lens. You'll look at your class as, okay, I'm a water mystic, so I am a healing mystic of some kind.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, exactly. So these would be augmentations. So it kind of be subclasses in a way, but we really like the concept of making this game very customizable. So it will take a little bit longer for players to come in and to learn what does all that mean. So there's going to be a higher amount of knowledge needed for min-maxing a build, essentially. So there's 2 schools of thought for creating characters for any game system. And you can either come into it from like an RP side of I have this character concept, and it doesn't really matter the stats, it doesn't matter what I can do. I'll fit that to this preconceived character that I have in my head. So, say there was a Minotaur biohacker, like that's just what you want to play. Um, that would come with certain restrictions. So, if we just use this as a quick example to go through, um, if you knew you wanted to play a Minotaur, that would make you come from Shiva, and you would have to start with water or air affinity. So that is either going to give whatever class you pick a either the water side, which is going to give a healing augmentation, or a mobility from the air side, and you can apply those to any of those classes. With the biohacker example, which we'll get into the actual classes in a moment, that's kind of the healer class as well. So you could either be potentially a better healer because of the water side, or a high mobility healer because of the element affinity. So if you go with that route, you'll be kind of bottlenecked into 2 options instead of 5. So it's a little bit restrictive, but it's also kind of the fun part of the game. Or you can go from the other side of I don't care what race I am, I'll play whatever, but there's a certain build that I want to go for. I want to have like as much damage as possible, or as much buff debuff as possible, and then you could just take the route that would do that. So, say we wanted to go with the high damage build and you didn't care what it was, you knew that you'd want to go into the fire affinity. So, that was going to put you for a race that's from Dragrua, Iria, Sakar, because those are the ones that have the option of fire right off the bat. So then that would bring you to dwarfs, gnomes, kobolds, or Sakar as the races to choose from. Does that make sense what I'm explaining? So there's two ways of going at either picking what I know I want this, and here's my options from there, or this is the build I want, and then it will limit you to the races that would be the min-max version. Or if you're okay with waiting for things as well, there will be at higher levels the ability to then dip into another elemental affinity. So if you have a delayed gratification, like if you're okay with that, you could do whatever. Say like I want to be a Zed, but I want that fire affinity and all that things like that. You wouldn't be able to take fire right off the bat because Zed have lightning and earth as their starting options, but then you would just at that threshold, that's when you could start it, and then your GM could always not necessarily start your players off at level 1, quote unquote, whatever it is. You could start them at a higher level at the second affinity. Does that make sense? So usually in the new
Or
system, you kind of want to start people at the lowest level, but if you just wanted to just go for an X, but say it's level 4 or 5 or whatever we pick, when you get the second affinity, you could just start them with that, and they start with 2. Everybody are right off the bat, 1 based on the race, and then they could just pick the second one from first game. Go ahead, you're going to say something?
you could do that, but you want, of course, to make the game open. Like the GM can always choose to disregard the lore that we have built,
Mm-hmm.
make their own system, and say, "Oh, in my system, the Minotaurs are fire and earth."
Yeah, there'll always be the option to change things how you want. We just got to give you some rules first so you know how to break them. But
Yeah,
ultimately, if you do follow the rules, you'll be able to build anything you want since we'll give you a second affinity at some point.
Mm-hmm.
It just
yeah,
limits your options right off start. But that gives you a lot of options to build an arc, a narrative about how you're getting where you're going.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, we definitely want to design this system to enable a slightly more complex way to play that's more thorough, more fleshed out. Um, Great thing about 5e is it's been simplified and it's geared towards getting new people to come in. The downside to it is it's a little too simple. So once you've played it enough, if say it is your first system or you've played other systems, uh, they have a lot more meat to them, and there's a lot
Yeah.
missing from 5e, and so we want to be kind of a middle ground where it's not too much, but it definitely offers a lot more for customizing a character, and so we want with the races to kind of have some what's the word I'm
A
thinking of?
baseline. You want to
Right.
create a baseline with, okay, if you want to get into the game, and you don't want to do GM doesn't want to do a lot of homebrew or a lot of work, then you take the baseline. But in the system, we create a framework
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to throw things out and put your own things in
Mm-hmm.
very easily. Like everything we create is a framework, and everywhere we're going to try to make it so that you can easily modify things, add
Exactly.
your things, remove some things like that those guys that thought of that, no, that's not my style. I'm gonna take that part out. I'm gonna put this part in. That's with the same thing with the classes. Um, you will have different abilities or different things in your class depending on your elemental affinity,
Mm-hmm.
which creates a very big sphere of different abilities, different feats, and instead of having a very linear thing like in 5e,
Mm-hmm.
you have a very spherical thing filled with all different things you can choose from.
Mm-hmm.
It needs a lot of play testing to make it balanced,
Mm-hmm.
but you can say, I take this, I take this, I take this. At level 4, I take that element, take this, take this, this, take this, take this. That fits with it. Maybe later on you can add another element or a refined element that are two together, and then I take this, take this, take this.
Mm-hmm.
So you can choose your path through the maze, so to say. Oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to take this path to the maze and take all these. So the replayability of the framework
Very
is a
high.
lot bigger, very
Yes.
high.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of play testing, but that's indeed what I have also been experiencing from 5e. It's a very structured linear system.
Mm-hmm.
Like multi-classing gives you a little bit of that choosing your own path in the classes, but otherwise it is level 1 to level 3 you choose a subclass,
Mm-hmm.
and then you might after level 5 multi-class to go into a different class and
Mm-hmm.
take some things. But the idea is that you can uh, in this system just jump from different things to different things. The framework will be limited in
Mm-hmm.
how we write it to give a starting or fit the world, the modules we're going to create. But if you're saying, nah, I'm not going to use your lore and world, I'm going to create my own.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I have all these abilities. I'm just going to let my players pick and choose.
Exactly. And with the augmentation to the classes as well, it's going to definitely open up uh, possibilities for not having to necessarily have, for example, if you in a traditional game nobody's a healer, it can definitely have hard ramifications for the party moving forward. Yes, some classes can get healing type stuff, but it's not going to be anywhere close to having a designated healer who that is their role. You could easily get away with not having a biohacker class, for example, in a system like this, as long as enough people dipped into water, you'll be more than fine. Um, so, and that'll go for any aspect of all of it. Is it'll open up a lot of possibilities. So the combination of uh, the elemental affinity changes to the classes plus multi-classing. So say you took fire as your starting affinity, you got to the higher level and you dipped into say lightning uh, as your second affinity. That's going to open up whichever class you still took to now getting the lightning modifications of it, but you progress a little bit further and then you dip into another class. Not only do you get the additions with the other class, you're also going to be getting both of those elemental affinities of that class stacked on top of the first class. So essentially, you'll go from one one class to two when you take the second affinity. If you multi-class, it would then change it to four, but they're all going to be the first versions of it. So you can either kind of become like a multiple, like think of it like a Swiss Army knife. You know, like how many tools do you want to have accessible that your character can do? But they're all going to be kind of small. So if you want to focus on having many smaller blades or tools, or then you could do that. You could branch into different affinities, multiple classes, or you can. I know I'm going to want to do this, and I want to specialize it, and you could scale up very, very quickly. If instead of taking a second affinity, you further dive into the one, and instead of multi-classing, you go further into that one class, you're going to have much more limited tools, but they're going to be much bigger, much more impactful versus the other way. So it's going to open up a lot of really fun things to where the party won't even have to be working together. Each person could do whatever they wanted, and there's no right or wrong way of doing it. So they can either all kind of do the same thing, or they could all do different things, or it could be a combination, and it should be okay. But that is, again, like you said, it's going to be a lot more playtesting. So that's kind of the overall gist of the classes, but let's go ahead and break through them. So Mystics, we talked about a little bit. How many tiers we're going to have is subject to change, whether it's 3 like we talked about here, or if it's 5. We like the number 5, but that almost seems too much. I don't know exactly what we're going to do with that. But let's jump into the first class that is from Starfinder. So we're going to be basing off of these, and like we said, they're going to have 5 different augmentations based on the affinities. Joe, what was some of the gists of the biohacker from Starfinder that we liked, or how they work?
Biohacker was kind of akin to an alchemist in some ways. So, kind of working on like enhancement drugs, healing ointments and salves, ways to use kind of science to enhance people, or the opposite with poisons and detriments and things. So, you'll essentially have kind of lab equipment. We had talked whether it being a portable lab. I think we had talked about a needle glove at some point, just visually injecting people. So, kind of a sci-fi fantasy hodgepodge of like plague doctor meets alchemist. Kind of run around buffing your team, hitting the other team with negatives. Did we hadn't quite nailed down what the affinities were necessarily going to play out to, but the idea would that be your primary attribute would be intelligence, and secondary might be wisdom, or if we're talking about specialties, that might change. But then with each class, we're kind of looking at the broader view of your elemental affinity. So if you're a fire affinity, then your concoctions, your abilities to affect others are going to be focused around damage, whether you enhance your negative effects to just be burning liquids that are kind of like doing extra damage in the enemy's veins, or if you're further enhancing your team's ability to output damage. Air affinity might be like just short range, like a smoke bomb type idea where you're controlling visibility, or a short range like hop teleport type deal where you swap with somebody.
Or like
Earth
a
affinity.
haste effect to the biohack, like they have one round of heightened mobility or something like that, where they can move a little bit quicker for the next turn or something.
Earth affinity, you might be able to like harden someone's skin so it's more resistant to damage, or just give them or kind of make the enemy more frail, like something that like attacks the bone structure and weakens it, kind of thing. Lightning would be buffs and debuffs, so blinding somebody, giving somebody like an enhanced reaction. And then water would be temp HP, healing wounds, things of that nature.
Awesome. So the baseline for the Starfinder biohacker came with micro labs, where they create a little customized kit with medical supplies, testing materials, pharmaceutical compounds, stuff like that. Use your micro lab basic med kit, chemicalizer, used for purposes applicable to the items. Let's see. So it was looking at like catalysts, nanites, special chemicals, mixing apparatuses and syringes together. You use the compounds to quickly fashion biohacks to augment it that way. So we really liked that idea. Don't know how much of it mechanically will take as far as stats and increasing in levels, but we liked that baseline kit. So if somebody, we want to have things be familiar enough to where, say, you've played Starfinder or you're familiar with it, enough things are similar to where you can reference it, but there are more than enough things that are different to where it doesn't feel like a copy and paste and just change the name kind of a thing. Because we want to have a whole new way of playing, and that's the whole reason for us making our own system. But basing it off familiar things is a good idea for familiarity, but also it's going to make playtesting a lot quicker and smoother. Um, but with all the changes, it's still going to be very hard to balance anyway.
Oh
uh,
no, like we're gonna take inspiration from everywhere we can get it.
mm-hmm,
For example, you might have a class that is like the 5e monk that doesn't fight with weapons, that can set it, like if he has the fire affinity, can set his hands on fire and deal more do fire punches, something like that. That's like the soul, maybe the soldier in that regard. Like, this is gonna be, yeah, take inspiration, look how we can use things that already exist, modify it to the system,
mm-hmm,
the elements and everything, the lore, and then write some stuff down and hope we don't write things that break the game.
mm-hmm.
You know, it wouldn't be fun. It's like, okay, we're gonna play test. Yeah, I made this character, and you look at it. Oh fuck. Well, the one shot is in an hour, so well, have fun being the most powerful PC in this one shot. Next one shot, that's gonna be changed.
Right. So that's kind of the quick down and dirty of the biohacker. And then we had talked about the possibility of like an engineer class, exactly what we'd call it or what we would akin it to. Not quite sure exactly where this one's going to fit, but we definitely need to have a mechanics slash piloting kind of class that will go above and beyond with assisting with different things. So because this is kind of a space opera meets fantasy TTRPG, there's going to be many additional things. So, like for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, maybe you have a cart and a horse or a war elephant or something pulling around, but you're not maybe doing animal handling check, but it's not going to be that serious of a thing. You're just moving around. This is definitely a much bigger scale, moving from across galaxies in different star systems requires a much different set of skills than just you know horse, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you have to have a certain level of intelligence and scientific knowledge and technology and stuff like that.
And with the
So
mystics being the only ones that really can teleport, if you want to get to another planet, you have to take a spaceship.
right.
Who's gonna service your spaceship? A engineer. If it is a PC character, then it will be them. If it is an NPC, you will need an engineer. But the engineer could also make upgrades to suits. If you have the money, build expansions, like we can make for the engineer like a whole modular system of things, of upgrades they can do to standard equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're not like the biohacker healing directly in combat. No, they before combat they put in the time. Like they may be a little bit less effective in combat uh, than the other classes,
Mm-hmm.
but their effectiveness come from spending the time, their expertise in upgrading armor, weapons, spaceships, whatever beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
and they will probably have and they probably have some gadgets they can use in combat um, to assist or damage enemies.
Perfect. So with engineer, we talked about intelligence and dexterity are your two most important attributes. Your primary or the other will depend on your specialization, whether you're wanting to go more mechanical or piloting. Definitely want to have some fun things of what being this class will give you. There's going to be a certain amount of like, you don't have to be a pilot to pilot. Like other people's just being in a society and a technology at a certain threshold, it's applicable to know how to pilot. But it would be more around like I can get around in a little starfighter versus a battle cruiser or something along those lines. You won't maybe you know the controls, but being actually there's a difference between being familiar enough to be able to figure out how to start something like that than to being able to effectively use it like regularly or in combat or navigate the thing, so we got to figure out where the threshold is of what we want to allow PCs to be able to do, because there is the whole scale of it. Like, if you can do a little dogfighter, how much of that transfers to a massive frigate or something like that? Is it the same controls, you're just bigger? Or is it a completely different set of skills that one has to acquire? Does that mean they have to be an engineer or pilot or however we structure that? Or can anybody just do it? So we got to think about that. The accessibility of piloting, how we want to run.
I would say everybody can pilot, and the bigger the ship, it would have a computer or a some kind of a computer that helps pilot it. But your pilot skill, or like as an engineer, you just get a bonus in being able to pilot. And the reason for that is because you know how the ship works, you know what kind of engines there are, you know how far you can push them, so you can get a little bit of extra edge out of a a starship or
Mm-hmm.
a landcraft, an aircraft, whatever you're piloting. You know what you have at your disposal more than the internal computer does. So you
Mm-hmm.
can override the computer and push that little bit farther, get a
Sure.
little bit of edge.
And we can also go from not necessarily the mental acuity as far as the credentials. You know, maybe all PCs could hop in and try to figure out how to fly something, but since this is a guild based thing and there's orders and different things like that, being an engineer would kind of give you a higher rank in credentially being a pilot. So you could, on the RP side, have a rank or a credential to where you would be believable to be competent in this, to where they would just, if the story allowed it, you could then just hop in and do it. When if you weren't that class, you're a nobody. Like you being able to convince somebody to allow you to do it if it wasn't your ship, for instance, you wouldn't be credible.
No,
So
they would trust an engineer more than a soldier.
exactly. So it's not that you physically couldn't do it, it's maybe the opportune moments without having to have story reasons or skill checks to convince them, like persuade or to deceive or something like that, to where or maybe it be like a first call thing. So say, you know, people are stranded on a thing and there's prisoners that were captured from all around and they escape and they're getting to, there's this one shuttle to get them all off planet. Is anybody a pilot? Like, obviously multiple people could maybe, like, it's an emergency, just somebody fucking grab the controls and get us off this rock. But is there a pilot? Like, people would look for someone whose specialization is that. They would just get first dibs. So we got to figure exactly what all that is going to entail. There's a lot of a lot of
Yeah,
things to look at.
we'll
Go
have
ahead,
to
Joe.
figure it out. But I think there's a pretty solid analogy just in driving a car. Most people, well, not necessarily everywhere in the world, but in many places of the world, we all learn how to drive a car.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of specialized subsections of driving. Police take special training on how to drive cars for being able to pursue and
Mm-hmm.
disable other vehicles. Driving in combat is something a soldier will know how to do
Mm-hmm.
that you and I don't know how to do. There's
Sure.
whole other things there. Stunt drivers, race car drivers. There's whole different skill sets you might have driving a vehicle that isn't just stop, go,
Sure.
turn.
And maybe like going to piloting school, you learn maneuvers. So like if there isn't a pilot, like we still want them to be able to go planet to planet, but we really like the idea of having combat being starship on starship kind of a thing. Not having a pilot, you could still maneuver and fire and stuff like that, but we give class based maneuvers to where if you have a pilot and they take control of the helm during that engagement, you now have these extra things that in normal PC interaction you're maybe kind of missing out.
Yeah.
Your character maybe can't do as much, so this would be a good multi-class because you want to be more applicable in your normal combat. That's just the PCs. But having somebody who has an engineer, even if it's multi-classed, it's going to really open up your ability on that aspect, which is going to be a small portion of the recommended game, but it will be there. But
Yeah.
leave it up to the GM. Say he really likes the naval combat. I know it's not Navy, but that's what we equate it to, right? The ships fighting.
Yeah.
Really likes the naval combat and wants to have a ton of it in their game. They're going to need a pilot PC, like to be effective in that. But having maybe like rolling maneuvers and stuff instead of just I just shift the starship over. I think that's definitely where we can expand on that. Would be really cool.
And definitely plenty of specialized knowledge. I feel like if you were a pilot and I wasn't, and I got in, I'm like, okay, well, this steers, and that's go. I have no idea what these 15 buttons do. And that, I'm not even sure how to quantify that. Is that a joystick? Is that a, I don't know. But the pilot's going to go, yeah, these control my various things and let me do maneuvers. That's weapons, dummy.
Sure.
And so driving isn't necessarily piloting.
Yeah, like in let's say a Boeing 737, there are only 15 buttons you have to around 15 buttons you have to flick or something to get the plane going.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot more buttons and dials there. Like you can get a plane into the air with like an hour of instruction, like just. So, okay, flick this, wait until that, flick this, push that button, push this handle forward, take the brakes off. Oh, and you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's an automatic pilot. A lot of things will be done automatically. But a pilot knows every switch, every button. They know exactly what it does. They know that pilots also get apart mechanics. Like, if something happens, like if a engine starts turns on, like lights on fire, they know where the fuel lines are, which fuel lines they have to cut to divert the fuel away from. Like that's the engineer. The engineer knows the ship. They have an advantage. They know how to push the ship. They know how to maneuver the ship better. Like and a race car driver as well. As like a race car driver, you need to have some mechanical knowledge because if you don't know your car, then you can't push it to the limit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also just cracking up the basic knowledge of what all the readout and information is. There's not just controls. There's also various things that are gonna give you information. So a non-pilot, you're going through space. Something starts beeping. Okay, what is it? You don't know. Is that a good beep or a bad beep? I don't know.
It's beeping. That's all you know.
Yeah, on the
and it's
screen
annoying.
Yeah, and it says 27 underneath. What does that mean? Oh, it's now 26. I think it's counting down. Let's read the manual. Oh, 26 minutes until the reactor is gonna explode. Ah, very handy to know. How do we fix it? Go to page 100. So,
especially because the engineers
how to cool down the reactor?
Yeah,
you're actually on the wrong page. That's just telling you to turn left in 26 miles. You're fine.
Yeah, like a bigger spaceship, like the smaller spaceships, like the fighters, would probably won't have a computer, an onboard computer, because it would be either too large or take too much energy, and you have to fully manually control it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need a lot of skill for. But like bigger ships, they would have a sort of mainframe / computer that if you just type in like, galaxy maps, I want to go there. Autopilot calculating, path calculated, and get press start to go. Start, and a little spaceship shows up in a little dotted line on the map, and you just slowly start accelerating towards it. Like that. Yes, everybody should be able to use the computer interface to get a ship from one spot to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But experienced pilots can have more efficiency, use less fuel. Fuel is going to be expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a pilot skill, you're like, okay, if at some point we switch this off, we change that, or we power down the reactor a little bit to save fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's going to save you money because fuel's expensive if you have to travel far. And
Mm-hmm.
the engineer can actually, if something happens during combat, like for example, the soldier has been training, so he's in the gunnery seat,
Mm-hmm.
uh, controlling several turrets, shooting at the enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get hit in the stern. So the like engine room is on fire, and the engineer is like, run, uh, put pull the fire system. After the fire system, hose everything down,
Sure.
start repairing. Like I would think like spaceship combat would be everybody man their stations, and they all have a job to do, and you all have to
Yeah.
work together to actually get the ship to shoot.
I like that idea of, yes, we need to flesh out these classes for individual in their own thing, but also have a complete starship portion of what that class does on the starship. So,
Yeah,
like the soldier being the gunner, yes, anybody could gun, but if you have a soldier manning it, then you have these, not maneuvers, but these extra things. So we have like a whole nother subset of classes, which would make uh, could guide your multi-classing as well. So say you
yeah,
want to be the gunner on the starship, so you should probably dip into soldier for classing, but it'd be a multi-class because you want to be a hunter for the rest of your story. Does that make
yeah,
sense? So that would be kind of cool to having starship
yeah.
classes
Yeah,
ingrained into the class. Yeah,
every class has a thing they're good at on a starship. Like somebody may be good at observing. Like he really knows how to use the scans and read all that data with their intelligence and wisdom all at the same time, and can um, unless you have a very powerful computer, can take that in and make something useful for the other PCs out of it or for the pilots before the computer can, because you have a very low key computer on board because you didn't want to drain your generator or
sure.
your like I also think like for the starship, like we will make some standard starships, but I like to develop a mechanical system where you can build your own starship
Sure.
that you that you can
What I would
choose. Like,
imagine
yeah, go
we
ahead.
should do would be to just get a list of starship systems, and essentially you come up with classes. This is an A class. This is an F class,
Yeah,
and
Well,
then essentially you get to design in your head what it looks like. But if it's a C class, it has
sure.
X many systems you can
Sure.
have.
Sure.
yeah,
Pull up in roll 20 in interplanet travel. We had talked about possible magical means, which I think we're pitting to the mystics. We have spacecraft, which will be the generic thing. We might have story plot wormholes for events happening. We have space whales, teleportation pads, but the majority of it is going to be under the spacecraft. We're going to kind of take a tangent from this. Yes, we're going to get back to the classes, which is we started with, but this is something we haven't really talked about, so we can kind of pull this up. So, spacecraft types. This is just going off of. This isn't necessarily what we're going to use, but I've been doing some research on different things. So, there's small craft, spaceships, capital ships, and then other. So, with small craft, there's escape pods, utility pods, space fighters, and shuttles. That'll be the more common. All adventurers will be familiar with these, and you don't become a adventurer if you don't know how to launch an escape pod, stuff like that. You know how to operate a fighter, like these smaller craft. That would be your generic one, and then the spaceships that would require the piloting mechanic, whatever it is, and then the capital ships above and beyond that would be restricted to you. If we even have these in the game, you're not even allowed to even touch these. A PC is not going to be able to afford having one of these. You don't have that. This is a story device. The NPCs or the guild people wouldn't even allow you to go onto the helm, if you didn't have authorization. So we can do it
yeah,
that way. So we have that. And
But you could build like your own spaceship. Like you could acquire maybe a hull that's just a hull with an engine, and you lug it around, and then over time, when you gain money or do favors for people, you add modules to it, and then
sure,
at the end you have a capital ship. But if the consequences might be, if it is a very powerful ship, the guild may say a nana, you have a very powerful ship that can threaten our ships.
sure,
We we gonna do something. Like you can be like, but you can also make the in this system. You don't have to follow a module. You could make a space pirate uh adventure.
mm-hmm, yep,
Like where you start with a small ship and you might sneak up on another ship, try to avoid their sensors, board the ship, take over the ship, and now you have two ships.
mm-hmm,
And you go to pirate stations that are very well hidden, but welcome pirates where you can trade what you have, all the booty you've gathered, and can get module upgrades or sell your ships and
mm-hmm,
buy new ships.
sure,
That's something you can do if we like when we have a very well fleshed out system for spaceships,
sure,
which I like to do.
awesome. So I'll be putting this material into the book, and then we can edit through it. But just to quickly run through it, since we're on the engineer piloting side, the gist of it: escape pods, utility pods, space fighters versus bombers, interceptors, stealth fighters, assault fighters, recon. I don't know how much of this we're going to use, but this is material and stuff that I found on their shuttles. You got drop ships, assault shuttles, gunboats, stuff like that. And then with spaceships, we have patrol boats, scouts. We have cutter, corvette, frigate, escorts, destroyers. There's cruisers, assault carriers, space fighters, cargo ships, tankers, colony ships, repair ships, troop ships, yachts, couriers. Obviously, there's a lot to it. And then capital ships. We have so these are like the most powerful ones. I don't know if we're going to use this, or if we do, it should be the Mystics have the control over this. Battle cruisers, carriers, Battlestar. We had talked about originally the Sicarians. They would probably have the capital ships originally, but it was wiped out when the thing supernovaed. So do they have any capital ships left? If they do, how many is it? Maybe they used to have a ton of them. Now they only have one. Or, how many do they have? Carriers, battle stars, stuff like that. World ships. So we can definitely get into that with other ships. We have other things. Prisoner ships, science vessels, hospital ships, space artillery, star bases. So like Solaris 8 would be in that category. It itself is kind of a space station, which is kind of a starship. Is it stuck in a rotation of in an orbit, or is it just free floating in space? Is it movable? That's all stuff we'll have to flesh out. So we do have a bit of stuff to look at for the engineer. This will be one of the more time-consuming ones because this class is very going to be tied into a whole stent that's different than the other classes, which we will get to. But that is the mechanic / pilot / engineer class. All right. Next one is the envoy. Which is loading, and that's going to be kind of comparing to D&D. It is the bard, I believe.
It's the analogy.
Charisma one. Yeah, go ahead and hit that one, Joe.
Yeah, so the envoy, they're gonna kind of like the face of a group, very bard-like. Their skills are a lot of social skills. They're gonna have kind of just the ability to manipulate people. A lot of the affinity stuff we had talked about was a little more interesting rather than being like necessarily true. I mean, there'll be some element of fire doing extra damage in combat, but the idea that you can bring that in and do social damage to someone, so maybe you expertise in blackmail or extortion, things of that nature. So this would be the guy who kind of gets by on words and manipulating people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else we had written down here. And we had talked about breaking them down into the idea of like a spy or a diplomat. Those kind of areas would all be suited to an envoy. So these are the kind of people you'll see representing other governments. I feel like we had tied these pretty heavily to the gnomes on some level. That you see a lot of gnomish envoys.
Yeah, with focuses on the social side, sensing motive, insights, stuff like that. Gotta kind of figure
just being
out.
all around, being very social and being very
Mm-hmm.
good in social situations. And maybe on later levels, maybe some mind-altering magics, like elements that affect the mind that you have to be able to save against or something. Like they just with the power of their voice, with their element, they can do something like with your mind.
Yeah, as far as combat, it'll be interesting to figure out what we want to do. Says envoy improvisations are language dependent, mind affecting, sense dependent, some combination of all these or all of them.
We got an ability called collective scale mockery instead of the vicious mockery. Collective scale mockery, just burn your enemy. Like, what? Did you wake up at the wrong side of your bed in this morning? Your hair looks all messed up.
So we gotta balance the. There's kind of three aspects to each of these classes. What does it mean for on the RP side? What does it mean for the PC side in combat? You know, like on your own, but then also Starship side as well. So this one's definitely gonna need to get some love and some really creative thoughts.
Big guns, yeah. Galactic burn. It's gonna be coined. Galactic burn.
So
it's gonna be an ability.
how would Envoy help with starships? Obviously, it's not all for combat. Maybe it's for bonuses for landing on a planet where you don't have clearance, or other things like that, where you'd have diplomatic immunities or credentials or access to certain codes that you can put in to kind of forge a maybe you're a fighter and you're going in for a stealth mission, but you know how to put the encryption in to have like medical or scientific researching credentials. So you're maybe not a registered scientific vessel, but you need to get past this blockade. Only science people are able to go through. This person could maybe use the
kind of
trickster side, right? But having that envoy on the ship, what does that mean? Well, then they can do these forgeries for authorizational areas, restrictions that they could bypass. Like ways of how could this class help on a starship? Normally it couldn't, but we could come up with ways of forging access codes or something like that.
Things like that. You could also put them like in a secondary seat, similar to Bardic Inspiration, where if you've got an envoy helping the gunner,
inspiring them. Yeah.
Morale based, like just being on the intercom. Okay, we're gonna do it this way. You can do it, and give the whole team a boost. If they roll well, then give a certain boost to the whole team every round.
Mm-hmm.
And then specifically, like you were saying, getting in places, the envoy knows the guy that knows the guy that
knows the guy.
He knows the guy who knows the Z. That
and the Z knows the Z.
And so you're in.
And he knows the guy. Yeah.
So yeah, kind of thing where without the envoy, you're dealing directly with the guy in charge of like incoming and outgoing departures of spaceships. And then if you have an envoy, he goes, no, don't talk to this guy. This guy's got
Cletus.
a rule book.
Let's talk to Cletus, who
you got to find his undersecretary's brother, because he's in a pinch right now, and he will get you a less used code if we just hook him up.
Sure.
Yeah.
That'd be
Welcome to
awesome.
platform B. State your clearance code. Hey, man, we had an appointment with Joe. Joe, he hooked like we had an appointment. Just look in your books, and he's like, Joe, oh yeah, there is an appointment for Joe. Yeah, yeah, just land. I'm gonna figure this out. And by the time you land, you send another message, and Joe uh, updates the logs again, and nothing happens. So like,
I do like that.
always,
He's just typing
yeah,
away at a computer. Tell him you got an appointment at Docking Bay 8 Zeta 7
yeah,
with Steve. And they're like, I'm not seeing anything. I'll just refresh again. Oh, there it is.
yeah.
And
Hey,
then you
Joe will
land.
hook you up. Joe is the guy.
And then just no trace of ever being there. There's a lot of, yeah, they might not be as useful in space combat, but there'll be definitely places, I think, as you're interacting with other spaceships and then docking,
Sure.
getting you places you shouldn't be.
All the
Maybe you
RP
get bumped
side,
in a
yeah.
line for, you get to refuel sooner because you remembered
Yeah.
that the guy in charge has a fondness for dark chocolate or whatever it is.
Sure. Some
Or like
exotic
yeah,
other
like
planetary thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it.
or yeah, while the envoy is keeping the guy talking to the guy, the hacker is like how you know how on a browser you can inspect elements and start changing things on the page. It's just inspect elements on this computer, just typing in things, and when you refresh it, it's gone. So oh yeah, hey, it just showed up. And then you land, and then you get you get your shit done, and by the time he refreshes his computer, it's like, fuck.
That's awesome.
Or even covering your tracks, like you're on whatever the name of the ship is, the Intrepid, and then you guys get into some hijinks. As you're leaving, you're like, yeah, no, the Intrepid's in trouble. We're the Excelsior now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, change your beacon code and shit. Like, what? The Excelsior? No, we are the Excalibur.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Next class is the hunter. Which is the ranged attacks. We gotta look at weapon systems, how they're gonna work. We had talked about do we have ballistics and or energy weapons? Do we have things that specialize against armor, against flesh, against energy? How does that apply to PCs versus starships? All that stuff. So a lot of this thing is so interconnected with other things that haven't been determined yet that we don't know exactly what it's going to be. And if I remember right with the hunter that we were wanting to do, there wasn't an exact Starfinder reference. But we liked the idea of having that, like the familiar kind of thing, like the companion that comes along with the hunter, and maybe making it some kind of drone.
Yeah, we had talked about a drone, and then your affinity kind of shaped how that drone worked, whether it was an attack drone or like a remote medic that could deliver healing supplies or a shield
Uh,
generator if it was
Mm-hmm.
Earth.
Shadowrun has something like that. It's called a rigger. They are like interfacing with technology. Like, yeah, the hunter might not be the correct name, but it's you could say one of the subclasses hunt like different names. One of the subclasses is hunter, where you actually have a living animal that you have trained, like may maybe a tiger, like a kind of a tiger, or a mastiff kind, or a wolf, or any other creature that we may invent
Mm-hmm.
for this universe that you can have. But the other two classes, one is focused on drones, um, support drones, and the other one is maybe focused on attack drones.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, where yeah, where you still have a familiar which still has stats and stuff like the other familiar of the hunter. Uh, but it's drones, and yeah, you know how to control your drones, and you know how to interface with them. Like, you know how to tinker with them, but the engineer is actually better at it. So if you have an engineer in the party, like upgrading your drones, so creating like a modular system for the drones as well, that could be cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you
The
can
other thing with the, I'm sorry.
yeah, so you can modify your drones. Go ahead, Joe.
The other thing we talked about was them being very gun centric, weapon centric, even
Mm-hmm.
just the idea that they could overcharge
Oh,
their
that's right.
weapons.
Yeah.
So you will kind of overcharge, overpower a weapon, and you're going to carry a multitude because you know they're going to break.
Mm-hmm.
But you might be able to set yourself up to just hit that one spot, do just truck tons of damage, and then that gunshot drop. I'm gonna pull out my pistols now because I'm gonna keep going with this fight. So you can exchange extended power for increased failure chances.
Mm-hmm.
Just a drone that is a weapon rack. Bam! Bam!
Your drone is just following you, carrying all the guns. Yeah, you just overload
Yeah,
them. Next gun,
yeah. Just a drone that follows you. That's a weapon rack with all your guns, and you're like, okay, that was a fun fight. Picking up all the broken guns. I need some time to prepare for the next fight. Make sure to not get into trouble because I now only have a phaser pistol that does that does good damage against flashy types, but minimal damage against armor.
Sure.
So don't do anything stupid. Hey, what is this? Oh fuck! Pew, 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 pew. I want my big weapon. Pew, 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 pew.
And I'm just picturing a really snooty hunter with a drone that is essentially a golf caddy.
Exactly.
7 iron, like with grenades, like 7 iron, please. And the enemies are like, "Ew, just lopping grenades in the middle of your enemies.
And then
Hmm.
hunters could have, obviously they're headhunters too. Like tracking people down. They're the bounty hunters. Uh, so we could have that RP side. That could maybe there being like a hunter type permissions that come for Starship. Like if tying with the Terrans and the max security prison. Obviously, if you were a hunter, you could be part of the policing agency. So you could be a, kind of a policeman of sorts, but you don't have to be. You could be kind of more of a shady side of that, like because there's the. Uh, we do have the scoundrel, which is going to be the smuggler type, which is going to be the shady one. So maybe the hunter's more of uh, the political one, the one that has the right standing and the credentials to bring these vigilantes to justice, kind of a thing. So maybe having some authorization with that, some ties to the prison, like you can have access to visiting or questioning prisoners on that asteroid planet prison, or you know what I mean. So we could have other things for the Starship and the RP side for hunters as well.
Yeah, well, you get on a planet, you're looking for a certain person, and while the envoy is chatting up the local populace, the hunter is like, "All right, he was here a day ago. I still smell him." Like, like the hunter just has an affinity to tracking people, like a certain skill, or bonuses and skills or whatever. And in the starship, yeah, the starship role, he will maybe be also a gunner. If you don't have a soldier, he would have been trained in gunnery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he might also be trained in boarding, like as the police force. Like police most often try to board instead of blow up people.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have been a policeman before and then became a hunter, like either for the police force or be independent, which is what is it, a bounty hunter, and he may have skills in boarding, and that might be one of your tactics. If you get close enough and you can't shoot through your enemy's armor, go in, get your hacker to hack a hatch, get in, and take people out from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe like long range scanner abilities, like finding people really far away that you normally shouldn't be able to very easily. Stuff like that.
Oh yeah, like a sonar operator
Mm-hmm.
in a
Submarine.
submarine.
Yeah.
They could like, if they look at the sound and or what the radar brought, like very minor differentiate
Mm-hmm.
spikes, they could see, hey, there is another submarine hiding there. Like, what? The line is flat. No, 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 no. There's a little bump there, and I heard it. There is a submarine there, and if we keep going, they're gonna shoot us.
Mm-hmm.
Like something like that.
Awesome. We touched on mystics a little bit. Next one's going to be scoundrel. So scoundrel, we were talking about being the rogue slash smuggler, so kind of close to the hunter, but it's going to be more on the chaotic side, not necessarily the lawful side. So, the contraband, the hiding the criminals who are on the run, getting them from point A to point B, or there's an important VIP that is maybe being hunted by a hunter. A scoundrel can help you escape and elude those. So there's kind of the counterpart to the hunter, like the polar opposite of using the non by the book methods, the street smarts kind of way. So they'd be quick thinking, quick moving, shadows, stuff like that. So the PC side of it, they would definitely have the excuse me. Let's bring that up there, scoundrel.
Like the hunter is very good at finding people, and the scoundrel is very good at not being found.
So they were called, exactly. The operative was the Starfinder equivalency. So key ability score for that is Dex. Secondary attributes, charisma or intelligence, depending on your speciality. And then we can have the elemental affinity changes, having trick attacks, additional damage when enemies are surprised, stuff like that. And then when we're looking at the affinities, fire affinity, you maybe get additional attacks, increasing the amount of attacks you can make on your attack action. The earth would have evasion, reflex saves, so you don't take partial effects. Lightning, exploitation, different effects you can apply if you have advantage. The air was quick movement, additional movement if you're unencumbered, and like armor, stuff like that. Field treatment, you can tend to your wounds if you're on the water side of it. Class features, was looking at cloaking fields. Different things like that.
Yeah, very roguelike, but then more in a space opera way.
Right. So, Scoundrel, real quick, I think is going to be pretty easy implications for the PC side, but as far as the RP and the Starship side, what are you guys' thoughts for Scoundrel on the surface level?
The scoundrel will probably be in charge of cloaking or of visibility of the ship. Like he would have some knowledge, I would say, about how not like he has knowledge about not being found as a person, but also not being found as a starship. So he would have he would be in charge of cloaking, visibility, those things. Like if you can cloak yourself, then it's a lot harder for your enemy to shoot at you, because the easiest way to target somebody is by sight.
Mm.
They might also be able to look at kind of typical charted paths between places and go, yeah, it's a little risky, but if we go through this asteroid field, we can get there faster, and we're almost certainly not going to be followed.
Yeah, how many parsecs? Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
You can go in a straight line, but there are patrols. If you zigzag a little bit, take a little bit of a detour, it will take 2 days more, but we won't be searched.
There's this nebula cloud that's in the way that can affect the ship, so everyone avoids it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, look, we'll get there 3 days sooner. You'll be green for a day, but we'll live.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of going around, we're just gonna go like the edge. We're gonna scave it. We're gonna serve the nebula.
And they might know ways to kind of hide things on board a ship if there's important, like a MacGuffin of some kind. Like we can't let them get their hands on this data drive.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Put it in a blue and white droid and send it off to the dust planet.
That's awesome. Okay, so that is Scoundrels on just kind of surface level. Again, we'll eventually get to the point where we actually start developing and fleshing all of these out. But we're just kind of scratching the surface for all these.
If we have the basic idea what we want to do with a class, then we can come up with concepts
Mm-hmm.
and see what people like those and how the other developers like the concepts. But if we flesh out what we want the class to be, like the soldier is like your typical fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He probably has a gun or uh, a sword. Uh, either a gun or a melee weapon, and he will probably hit or shoot things and be very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And probably it's going to be like the fighter in 5e, the easiest class to get into because it is very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to have one of those classes where somebody new can just for a one shot, I play a soldier to get into the game,
Mm-hmm.
and then next time I play a envoy and go with all the political web thingies and have to work with that.
Sure. Let's see. For Soldier says conflict is inevitable result of life. Every world that harbors complex living organisms, creatures battle one another for dominance. So soldiers will just be able to be applicable in any situation. They can be career soldiers, fresh mercenary recruits. So yeah, this would definitely be a can fit into any situation kind of class. More versatile, a little bit of everything. I think this would be kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. But the mastery side would be the fighting style kind of things like that. So in combat, you're going to definitely have an edge for just brute things, or you guys go to some kind of space tavern or something and the fight breaks out. Obviously, a soldier is just going to be able to hold his own and brawling, that kind of thing. And then we had talked about, so just giving them combat feats, maybe proficiency with gear, things like that, sustainability. So they're going to be that way. As far as the RP and the starship side, they would be the gunners. They would be the the not flashy things. I would think. So yeah, if we keep them just kind of a basic thing, so they're very easy to get into. We'll have particular things if you're wanting to min-max a character. We definitely want to set up an aspect of that. I personally don't enjoy that. I really like the RP side of TTRPGs, but there are a lot of people who play them because they really enjoy them in maxing as well. So we definitely want to have classes set up to where there is a meta, like that's inevitably going to happen. There's going to be something that on paper is stronger, and have aspects of soldier to, yes, it's an entry level thing. It's to get people associated, and the recommended class to take if it's the first game you ever played, take soldier. You know what I mean? But there be an aspect of it to where it's still applicable for those high tier things that they get that other people don't. But
probably with a set of features or feats that you can choose and combine to customize your soldier into a speciality, but also that they can go any way. Like you can have a soldier that's a very good pilot and train towards being a very good pilot, or they trained a little bit in mechanics, or they trained in talking to people. Like they can go every way, but all the classes will just have that little bit of an edge. Like the soldier can never reach the ceiling, so to say. He's
right.
always a feet short, where the other classes, like the envoy, can touch the ceiling on social stuff, and the soldier can get close. But if you focus completely on that path, but yeah, we don't want the soldier to be, oh yeah, the soldier can be the best at anything
Sure.
if you build it the right way. Like we want it to be
But his
able to
lull
do.
points is more spread out though as well. Like other ones would have like you can peak, but then other areas you're much lower. This one's it doesn't peak as high, but the low points are higher than the other low
Yeah.
points. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't go as low. But the nice thing of that spread is they're a soldier. So yeah, we taught you how to shoot every gun we manufacture. We taught you how to survive in many environments, and we taught you how to wear all this armor. what you choose to be best at is fine. And then the extra layer of affinity gives you a few options to just kind of add some variety to every class. The nice thing is, I was thinking about it earlier, just we don't have a whole list of like 15 classes or whatever, but just the ability to combine them combined with that
Mm-hmm.
elemental affinity.
Mm-hmm.
Like a soldier, there are, I think I did the math, 15 different types of soldier based on the different combinations or doubling down on one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of variety just in one thing. So choosing if you want to be all about mowing down enemies, all right, well, you're going to be a double fire soldier. You're going to walk in, two machine guns blazing with a grenade in your teeth, and it's going to be one hell of a bloodbath. But you can
Yeah,
figure out other ways to play too.
yeah,
Sure.
quadruple dip into gunnery or something like one dip, two dip, three dip, four dip. You have two extra arms with machine guns on your armor, and like hello,
Sure.
or like four Gatling guns, like just in front of you is just a hail of bullets. You don't want to be in front of this guy.
Right.
And then
Awesome.
you have like the what was it? The hunter coming there like ammo, ammo from his drone, ammo, ammo. Keep feeding the ammo.
That's awesome. All right, so that was the basics of Soldier. We are getting towards 1 o'clock, which is when we were saying we needed to end this week. So let's jump into the last one, which was Vanguard. Vanguards were the tanks, the damage mitigation, the crowd control. Uh, Primary attribute of Constitution, secondary being Dex or Strength, depending on speciality. Let's see what else, and then let's pull up the reference material for Starfinder. So entropy. This was the entropy class, I believe, right?
Yes.
You had a pretty good gist of this one, Joe. So you want to jump into with the Vanguard? This one seems really, really cool, actually.
Yeah, the interesting part about the Vanguard, essentially, we were building it up so that as you took damage, you grew in strength.
Mm-hmm.
Where if we're looking at like a shields type of system or a temp HP thing, where you can rely solely on temp HP because your goal is to get hit down. Every time I think about Vanguard, I think about in Borderlands 2, the Bandit class. Once you hit 33% health, now you're as strong as you're ever going to be, but you're
Mm-hmm.
this close to death.
Mm-hmm.
So they can kind of steal the momentum from other, and like just the potential of the combat around them as they're getting hit. They're building up this entropic energy that they're going to be able to release as an extra attack or like an auto crit, or to be able to take an attack as a reaction. There'll be a lot of different ways we'll play with what entropy means for them, but it's the guy who's going to get out on the field, and he's hard to kill, not because he's hard to hit, but because the more you hit him, the less likely it is you're going to hit him again.
Right.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to have a high AC or DC, whatever you want to call it, whether it's damage mitigation, the armor class. You'd actually want to build him easy to hit, and you'd put yourself in vulnerable places to take the damage because your damage increases and your abilities increase with taking more damage. So having a Vanguard is would actually be very useful for a party because they are going to want to take the damage. I think that is a really cool spin on tanks with, like, for instance, we always compare it to D&D 5e, right? Because that's the mainstream main Dungeons and Dragons thing. Yeah, there are a lot of people who play Pathfinder, stuff like that. But tanks can handle the front lines, but there is not a lot of incentive for them to place themselves in good spots, except for it helps my team. But if somebody's kind of a more selfish player, nobody wants to be there. With the entropic Vanguard idea, that is where you're going to want to be, not because it helps everybody else, because it makes you more powerful. So even your selfish players, if they go this build, you can still be a DPS, which is more fun than just damage mitigating. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it gives you a personal reason to be the tank in addition to just it's a team role that someone had to
exactly.
fill.
Exactly.
And it's extra fun just the idea of this entropic energy they get to play with because it just lets us find interesting ways to have that interact with their affinity.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're looking at everything through the lens of what are they affinity with, well, maybe you can use that entropic energy to turn around and deal extra damage because you've got
The
fire.
fire, right.
Maybe that your wounds are smoking with heat because you're just got all this just fire energy mixing with that entropic energy. Or maybe you picked water and it lets you kind of keep yourself from actually dropping so you can heal yourself just enough to stay right on the edge or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. But it gives us a way to interplay with the affinity in a way that's pretty unique.
Mm.
I would say like the Vanguard have multiple subclasses. Like one would be it's already very hard to hit him, and if you manage to hit him, he gets even harder to hit. That's like the typical tank. And you can have like a berserker that wants to get a hit because every time you hit him, he gets stronger.
Right, like the Earth Vanguard would be as he gets hit, he gets harder to hit, but then the
Yeah.
fire side would be that doesn't go
Hit
up,
me, hit me, hit me,
but he
because I'm
does
gonna
more
hit you back.
damage. Exactly.
Yeah. And
And then
then maybe one in between that is more balanced between the two, like from the ultimate tank to the ultimate hit me, hit me, hit me. I'm gonna hit you very hard back because you hit me that much. And then one in the middle that can have something of both. That people yeah, that has some other things
well, if you
that make
wanted
it
both, then
interesting.
you would take fire and then earth. That would give you both. You know, there's no
Yeah, you'd
need.
end up in the middle.
Yeah, there's no point of having one that's in the middle because then there's no point of getting fire and earth. So you'd have these specialities. If you wanted a hybrid, then you would take both affinities, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
It'd be the difference of double dipping in earth or double dipping in fire and then being a lava vanguard who
sure.
is that balance.
Oh no, maybe the third one is like how do you say that more
Well, there's
based
five for
on
each of them.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more water based, like he will create auras around it. Like I am like the sort of paladin of 5e.
Well, that would
Like
be
I create
lightning
out, yeah,
because that's
lightning
buff
or
debuff. Yeah, lightning would
yeah.
be the more paladin side. Well, water
Well,
would be healing himself.
lightning and maybe water. That if you stand close or behind him, you get temporary like a ability gives
Yeah,
temporary hit
if you
points.
blended and became a storm, water and lightning,
Mm-hmm.
you might be able to extend your
Mm-hmm.
healing. That's the very cool part about the affinities. They all have their cool thing they do, but you can find interesting ways to mix them.
Sure.
Indeed.
So yeah, with the fire, I get hit, I do more damage. Earth is I get hit, I get harder to hit physically, like the AC side. But then the air would be I get hit, well now I can move quicker. If I get hit again, I can move now more quicker. You know what I mean? So it could be that entropic focus on mobility, to where like a the rogue side, the scoundrel, they maybe have a little bit higher mobility, but the entropic vanguard that is on the air side has the highest potential mobility. Like the other ones are baseline higher, but this one you just does that make sense? You could focus your entropic
Yeah,
side
because it
to
scales, you can hit peaks others can't, but you just can't hold them.
right,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
you have to build up, and then in that fight, you're the best anyone could be. But any of the fight, you're back where everyone else is,
Hmm.
or lower because it's not your specialty.
And then for RP and starship side, what could we tentatively
Well, the
think for
Vanguard would be the defensive Vanguard would be in charge of shielding, uh, armor and maybe force fields, if you're gonna implement force fields. And the other one is by like drawing an enemy, like make an enemy shoot apart, like how do you say that? The same thing about like taking damage or reducing your defense by getting a greater offense.
Mm.
So I don't know exactly how we're going to implement it. We probably will find a way.
We'll have to
Uh,
figure it out. But the Vanguard could either be like you were saying, trading offense for defense, internal trades where you sacrifice
Ah,
one thing for another, But you might also be able to do like a tactical trade where it might be seeing an opening where
Oh
others
yeah.
don't. Like if you're on the bridge or whatever, you might say, okay, I see that this is what they're about to do. We can take advantage of that by hitting harder here or moving into a better position this way
Sure.
because I've
Yeah.
recognized how they're about to attack. Or you could do it internally, like he was saying, like Bart was saying. Excuse me. Then you can say, all right, we can't kill these guys. We have to run. So I'm gonna drain most of our gunning ability for thrusters.
Right. Yeah, like in Star Trek, where they're like transfer power from here to here. You know what I mean? Like,
Things like
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
Full power to forward deflect the shields.
Right.
Give her all she's got, Captain.
Okay. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, or like doing a fake, like giving them giving the enemy a signal that you're dropping your shields in one part to maybe power up your guns, but actually it's a fake. You increase very quickly. Like you have a maneuver that you can increase the shielding there, so their shot won't do any damage there, which gives you a free attack, so to say, an attack where you don't take damage, but you do deal damage.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Or Vanguard's on the ship side, drop shields, full power to the
Oh yeah,
forward cannon. You know, like we
yeah.
are completely sitting ducks, the whole entropy thing, but Kamehameha, you know, like just full on blast from your ship. But if anybody else shoots us, we're fucked. Like it's going to
Yeah.
do whole damage instead of shield, that kind of thing. Where like,
Yeah, like drop the shields, out power to forward, deflect the shields, read out all the other power to the engines. We're only 10 kilometers away. It's a ramming time.
That's what you want to see in space.
That's awesome. You
I
just
do love
drive
that.
a hole through the other ship, but the back of
But-
you know, could get totally obliterated, but you're just like this cutting wedge. You just.
Yeah. If you have like a ship that is shaped, like if a Vanguard would be the leader of the team, and it's like, well, of course, we're gonna take a ship with a very big front hull, so when everything else fails, we can just ram them. Just ram them.
I do love that. Ramming speed. We're going to take some hull damage, sir. Not as much as them, though.
Well,
And that's all right.
we'll have everybody in the forward compartments move back. We'll seal them off, and that is now our bumper.
Yeah,
But
pressurized.
maybe also,
Yeah.
maybe your shield systems are there, but if you have a Vanguard manning the shields, he can absorb some of that incoming energy to redirect it.
Oh, like put it into other systems.
So the idea
well,
that you can do
yeah,
something when you get hit.
Maybe if the weapons, like if the weapons use elemental magic, then he might be able to like stand there like, okay, let them hit me, like, yeah, full power to the to the guns, and like the guns are like charging, and then boom, just fiery energy arcing towards your enemy, obliterating their shields. Like smoke starts to billow from the enemy, and you're like, are they dead? No, they're still moving. So a couple of more shots there and a couple more shots there. That's to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah, we can do a couple different things with the Vanguard to make them interesting on a ship.
Yeah, like make him actually take damage, like absorb
Sure.
incoming fire, like giving him like you have to roll and he might go down. And somebody has to get to him and get him back up. He might go down, but if he survives the hit, he can power like he can
He can
redirect
channel
all
his
the energy.
entropy into the crystal.
I
Like
love
he
the
physically
idea.
grabs. He's hugging the crystal.
I was just picturing a guy. We're not going to be able to take down the shields with our guns at this level. Make sure you aim right. What are you doing? He just rips open a panel, grabs some wires, and he just tenses electricity, grabs some other wires, and a connection that was not supposed to be made is now fueled with entropic energy.
Empty the forward torpedo tubes and pressurize it because I'm going outside. And just launch your Vanguard all charged up, like arcing with energy, half on fire towards the enemy, and and it's like just he goes through the hull of the enemy. It's like we have to get him. I hope he's still alive.
Send our biohacker out. Yeah. Awesome. What about RP side for Vanguard?
They could have been bodyguards initially. They could be in the army. What RP role would they fill? They would be like the backup, like like kind of the muscle also.
Hmm.
Um, they should have had some like if they should, well, probably more on the larger races. They should have some intimidation. Um, like they are maybe not very social, but they're like physical.
Hmm.
They project physicality. So is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
You get, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like they project their like they don't say it, but you can feel it in the air, so to say.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, so that was a rundown of the races and the classes. We talked about the elemental affinities and how it's going to affect it, the classes, and how they'll kind of be subclasses within each one. Still have a lot of developing to do. That kind of gives the overall. We talked about the classes having uh, which affinities they come from based on their planets. And then we went over uh, the stats, the maximum and like the high and the low stats a little bit. We were wanting to get into more mechanics this week, but we got to end in 7 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll get to that one next week, but we will kind of preface it a little bit with some details so that way when we get into it
Yeah.
next week we can just jump straight into the mechanics.
We hope to get together again during the week so we can do flush it out like what we wanted to do on stream, so we have something to present next week to get some feedback on like what you guys think about the base system, because we need the base system before we can actually start developing the classes
Mm-hmm.
and say what races like what pluses and minuses they have, like what stat is it actually. So yeah, unfortunately, well, we had a lot of fun with the classes and very expanding on that, and we have a good idea about what we want to do with the classes. Now we need the basic mechanics to build those classes.
Mm-hmm. And we liked the idea originally of having, I don't know exactly how we're going to implement it, but we liked the idea of having a combat character sheet and then a social character sheet as well. So on these sheets, we might even go to three then. If we had a PC, a RP, and a starship character sheet. That might be, since that's what we were talking about now, we like the idea of multiple things, that your character sheet itself has 3 pages essentially that you would build and you would work off of, and you would reference different things and then different races and classes and all the different things, the backstory, all those things would have implement, implementations to each of these 3 pages, the sheets essentially for those. Um, we
Yeah,
had
a sheet with everything important for. Well, you're on a spaceship. This is all the things you can do on a spaceship,
exactly.
and how good you're at it. Oh, you're in social situation. Everything you can do in social situation. Very flushed out, so it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to find, and you don't have to do a lot of calculating. It's already done.
You have to
And yeah,
bounce
then you
between the different sheets that you could know. If I'm in combat personally, I use this one. If I'm doing RP session, I use this one. If I'm on Starship, I use this one.
yeah.
So some information might be the same, but it'd be really nice to have everything needed for that situation on that one sheet instead of having to like,
Yeah,
flip through different pages and everything like that.
like yeah, in combat, like you want your, if you have spells, you want it to be on the same, because I've said at tables like a spellcaster was okay, flip 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 flip, level 6 spell, okay, this spell, find the spell card, okay, this is what the spell does, flip 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 back
Mm-hmm.
to the front, uh, okay, I got this bonus to it. No, it's all on one sheet, and we probably won't have. We'll probably have a lot of abilities or features and not a lot of spells, I think. I don't know. That's
You'll have to
the
really
gist of the.
define exactly how you can use your affinity
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
before we get there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess real quick before if we can just a real broad stroke on mechanics.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been looking at scales for things. With a D20 system, you have a 5% chance of any number. You've got a
Mm-hmm.
5% chance of a critical failure and a 5% of a critical success. Is that something we want to emulate? In my head, I've been shifting more towards a scale that essentially 4 or 5 different charts based on how skilled you are in a thing. So let's say I'm a trained pilot, I use the trained chart,
Mm-hmm.
and it has varying sections for how likely success, failure, and critical success are. Whereas if you are a master, the highest level, you might have that 5% chance of critical success, and then a pretty low chance of critical failure.
Mm.
Whereas if I was trying to do the same thing, but I was completely untrained, I would use that chart, and I'd have maybe a 1 or 2% chance of critical success and a much higher chance of critical failure
Mm-hmm. Okay.
compared to succeeding. So I guess the broad strokes is how easy do we want the success of things to be relative to how trained you are? Do we want to make a system where if you aren't trained, it's more likely that you're going to fail than succeed,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of be a little bit punishing on that end, but then rewards you with,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're very trained in this, you're almost certainly not going to fail, and you have a reasonable chance at critical success.
Yeah, we had talked
Yeah.
about the 5 levels of proficiency: incompetent, inept, neutral, proficient, and expert. So if we took that idea, maybe looked at implementing 5 versions and just had 5 charts or 5
Yeah.
scaling, maybe 3. I don't know, but that's what we had talked
We'll have to
about
play
before.
with it.
Yeah,
In
well,
my
Yeah.
head, I've been looking at 5. But
suggestive charts. Like the DM can always
yeah,
determine what, but this is what we made. This is gonna work in the modules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked about that, Joe, in the hour we had, and we also were looking at the system, like which dice are we gonna use, and Joe suggested the D100.
that's what I've been looking at. We can all come back and figure out what we're doing.
I like D100 because you can still have your critical success on a 100 and a critical fail on a 1, but the chance is not 5%, it's 1%, which is
Or it could be 3, or it could be
We can adjust.
17, based
yeah.
on the proficiency thing.
It's very
Exactly.
Yeah,
variable.
yeah, but like you can still keep the critical success and fail on a 1 and a 100
Mm-hmm.
in the game. Um, Maybe if you're the expert, like the pinnacle of of being a pilot, then if you roll a natural 1 on a D100, it actually doesn't like it's just not a automatic fail. It just didn't went as well as I would
Well,
have
I
wanted.
think that a 1, if we did a D100, it doesn't matter your expertise. A 1 is still a 1. You know,
Yeah,
you
on
fail
the
always with a 1, but
Yeah.
maybe it's a 3,
But the
1, 2, or
severity of
yeah.
failing is if you're untrained, like, oh, I rolled a 1 on my pilot skill. I flew into an asteroid. Where an expert is like, I rolled a 1 on a thing. I scaved a little bit of the paint, avoiding the asteroid that the other guy was going to fly into.
Mm.
Something like that. Like, yes, you failed at what you tried to do, but the severity of your fail is different, or like different depending on how skilled you are.
Yeah. So I guess my broad strokes question is just how punishing. I hate to say punishing. How much do we want to have critical success be influenced by level of skill?
Mm.
Do we want to directly correlate that?
If you roll a 100, then if you're unskilled, you will do well at that. You do better than that you would be averagely doing at the thing you're trying to do. But somebody that's expert and rolls a natural 100 will be able to, if it was a smith, like create the best piece of armor that is in the whole solar system or in the whole system. That was weird. Like that made the best piece of armor because they are an expert and rolled a 100, natural 100, where the untrained or the slightly trained made a very good piece of armor, but compared to an expert, that's a little bit below average, maybe average. Like I like that system. Like what I don't like in like 5e is, oh, you don't know any magic, roll me an Arcana check. Natural 20? Oh fuck. Like what am I going to do? You have no experience. You don't know what magic is.
Mm-hmm.
But now you rolled a natural 20 and I have to reward you for not rolling a natural 20.
Mm. Mm. All right, so yeah, we will postpone the attributes and mechanics and all that stuff till next week. So we'll hit that on episode 3. Um, we hope everybody enjoyed episode 2. We covered a lot of extra things. We can finally get to the actual developing on stream next week. We appreciate everyone's patience. We'll eventually get there. This is a very big project, very big game, new system, new everything. So it does take a while to get you guys caught up on what we got. But we are slowly checking those boxes. So next week we'll hit the ground running with or not combat, the just mechanical side of what we're kicking around. Um, so yeah, thanks for joining us. Again, the other content bits for the channel on Sundays we have Ages Past. All the games are at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Tuesday we have Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Wednesday, very soon, we have Rise of Unity. And then Saturday mornings we have. Oh, thanks for the follow. Welcome. Yes, Saturday mornings we have this project, the world building. So hope you guys had fun. Join the Discord. Lots of information if you guys want to play the guild games with us. If you want to tell us about your experiences. If you want to apply for joining this team, we are taking applications. It is on the world building side. There is the pinned documentation for that. You guys can submit an application. We are wanting to grow this dev team, and also if you just want to stay a viewer, we are also, once we get to the developing portion, we'll be looking at the chat for all those ideas and in the Discord as well. If you missed last week's episode 1 for world building, it is on our YouTube. Link is down below. I think that's it. Do you guys have any plugs or anything you want to hit before we head out?
No, I just threw the Discord up in the chat again, just so it's there.
Perfect.
Whether you're ready to commit, like I'm ready to hop on the project, or you still have questions, still swing by. We're there. We're active. We can answer questions. There's a whole other great community to be discovered and be a part of. So come check out the Discord. I promise we're nice people, and we'd love to chat with you and see you on all our other projects.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you're new to the channel and you like what you saw, make sure you follow and click the notification bell. I'll let you know when we go live. If you guys want to support the channel, you can subscribe. And that will get you some emotes and some cool things. We have mini games in the chat where you'll get increased chances for winning all that every quarter. We reset the table tokens that we have, and the top 60 get VIP badges next to their names. We have usually more viewers doing the actual games, so less on this side, so nobody's really playing the games too much. If you guys want to get some cool swag, we got some awesome merch. We got t-shirts, which I'm wearing here. We got hoodies. We got coffee mugs, stuff like that. You guys can get some cool stuff to represent your favorite show on the channel. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll catch you guys next week for episode 3. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing before we go. If you think I don't want to be developer, but I like to be playtester either as a GM or as a player, I am already trying to collect people names to throw them into a hat. So when we have something to test, that I can message you and get into a voice call, talk to you about what we're trying to test and the material, and show you the material we have. So it will probably be a few weeks before we have a play testable, but I like to collect names. I like to have a list of people that I already have established that are willing to help either as a GM or as a player. So yeah, join the Discord, yada yada yada, the whole riddle what was just said, and just let us know. Fill in the application. Even if you don't want to join the development, you can do the application form and just tell us that you want to be a player or a GM.
Lots of ways to help out, so don't hesitate to come say hello.
Indeed.
All right, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for joining us.
I bid thee a good day.